The spirit of healing is a legendary creature that, according to the lore of this fantasy world, is capable of performing true miracles. It is said to possess incredible beauty and colossal power, which is why it is revered as a deity in the human world. The unknown creature muses that with such a reputation, the goddess of healing should be able to cure even catless. It then begins to pray to the spirit of healing in the desperate hope that it can cure the cruel affliction that is plaguing it. The creature begs the spirit to appear, and vows that if it lends it its power, it will surely pay in kind. The situation is becoming increasingly tense as this dragon's determination is at an all-time high. At the same moment, a magic circle appears, which acts as a magic portal. However, instead of a goddess, a completely ordinary person appears, who clearly does not suspect that someone is calling him somewhere. The giant dragon and the frightened man look at each other for a long time, trying to understand what it all means. The dragon reflects that people have rather strange standards of beauty if they consider such an appearance beautiful. However, he understands that the most important thing here is ability, and he turns to the spirit with a request to lend him its great power. The young man reflects on the fact that, apparently, he is finally going to the next world due to the incredible stress he is experiencing. The main character is a veterinarian named O-jin, who is 32 years old and has been studying at university for a very long time. After completing his studies, he toiled for 3 years in a low-paying job, enduring hardships and hardships. However, luck finally smiles on him, and he opens his own office, but troubles follow him there too. There are almost no clients, and he has to save a lot in order to survive each of his difficult days. At a certain point, the amount of rent debt and interest on the loans suffocates him so much that he thinks about his own death. And it is at this moment that the giant dragon decides to summon him to another world in order to borrow great knowledge from him. Ojin contemplates that he is dying of a heart attack in his sleep or some other cause, and is now presumably going to hell. The thought that there is a giant aggressive lizard in front of him, and a cave with a pile of gold around it, confirms his suspicions. Ojin approaches the dragon and asks what it intends to do with him now, after which the creature asks him to simply heal its pet. Ojin suggests that even after death he should work as a veterinarian and ponders what kind of pet a dragon might have. Meanwhile, the dragon demands that his dear pet, which he treasures so much, be immediately cured. Afterwards, he hands him a small fruit bat named Catless, who is on the verge of death. Ojin looks closely at this creature and realizes that in front of him is a very ordinary bat that needs treatment. The dragon asks him what he thinks about this case, hoping that he will be able to cope with this affliction. Ojin carefully analyzes the poor guy and realizes that he looks very bad, as he is exhausted and weak. He switches into professional veterinarian mode and asks the dragon how long he has been looking after this animal and when the symptoms appeared. The dragon reveals that his pet's name is Catless, and that he has been keeping it for a week, as bats are considered fashionable pets. He explains that compared to other dragons, he realized that he had never had an interesting pet to talk to. He adds that it was then that he thought about having the cute baby he saw in his cave. Ojin looks at the dragon with a look full of misunderstanding and aggression, since he really doesn't like such owners. In his book of principles, the second most hated type of owner is those who get pets purely for fashion reasons. Ojin realizes that the dragon really wants to cure his pet, so he decides to behave more decently. He asks him what the bat eats, to which the dragon states that he catches animals for her every day, but she never touches them. Ojin feels anger building up in his body, as this dragon just proves itself to be an even more incompetent master. Ojin also hates those owners who don't care how to take care of the animal they have. The dragon looks at him with interest and asks if it is a serious illness, stating that he is ready to do anything. Ojin loses his temper and abruptly explains that it is a fruit bat that does not drink blood and has no connection with violence. Afterwards, he gives the giant creature a lecture, explaining that Catless eats only fruit, and that is why he is so ill. Ojin also points out that the temperature in this cave is too low, and that the mouse may simply not wake up from hibernation. The dragon is very surprised by such behavior on the part of the healing spirit, but he cannot do anything against him, since he loves Catless. After some reflection, he realizes that there is no turning back, because, while loving nature, he unknowingly makes terrible mistakes. He realizes that no matter how tiny this mouse is, it is still alive, and he needs to take responsibility for his pet. After this, he bows his head and carefully tries to pick up the little bat to talk to it. First of all, he admits that his selfish desires and delusions are causing him to suffer. The dragon also states that he never meant to hurt him and deeply regrets being so careless. He promises to bring him fresh fruit and then return him to where he took him from, so that he can continue living his life. He adds that the pet's happiness is much more important to him than his own greed, and expresses gratitude for this important life lesson. Ojin reflects that this hell turns out to be much more reasonable than he first thought, and perhaps it's not so bad here. The dragon turns to the protagonist, thanks him for making him come to his senses in time, and asks what he wants. Ojin reveals that he would like to be born as an Arab prince and oil tycoon in his next life. The dragon listens to him attentively and does not understand a single word, assuming that this is probably the language of the spirit of healing. After some time, he turns to him again and says that he is ready to provide him with one very interesting thing. He hands him a small pendant, explaining that it is a magical artifact infused with his divine power. He also explains that with this artifact one can create whatever one wishes, but if one's intentions are evil, the artifact will not work. The dragon continues to tell the unsuspecting Ojin how grateful he is to him and calls him the spirit of healing. After this, he wishes him a safe return and activates another portal, which starts the transfer procedure. Ojin wonders in his mind if this place really is a metaphor for the afterlife. After a while, it occurs to him that right now he is entering some kind of story from a comic book, and he doesn't like it. He turns to Mr. Dragon again and says that if his reward is to be brought back to life, he has a request. At the last minute, he demands to be returned to the early days of Bitcoin's emergence so that he can buy in time. The dragon, of course, doesn't understand anything, and then happily heads to the exit of the cave to get some fruit. Ojin is transported to an unknown place that looks nothing like the world he was originally taken from. He doesn't realize it yet, and is upset that he is missing out on a chance that he feels only comes once in a lifetime. He reproaches himself for not asking for a golden plot of land in a prestigious location, or shares in some large company. He sadly realizes that he should have learned to make wishes faster so as not to receive some pathetic trinket for his work. He remembers the dragon's words about divine power, and tries to understand what to do with such a thing, about which he understands absolutely nothing. Angered, he realizes that he was never told how the item works, and accuses the dragon of making it a useless thing. Suddenly, a strong young man approaches him, and asks why he is standing in the middle of the road and getting in his way. After this, he pushes him aside and orders him to go to the devil so as not to interfere with carrying things. Ojin only now realizes that something is wrong here, and decides to look around to figure out where he is. He hears unfamiliar voices, which indicate that, apparently, he is entering some kind of bazaar. Taking a closer look, he finds himself in a medieval town that looks nothing like modern-day Korea. He is pushed aside again by a passerby who asks him why the hell he is standing in the middle of the street and bothering other people. Ojin feels like the blow to his shoulder is very real, as if he is actually being reincarnated and entering another world. He remembers the dragon's words about sending him back, but now he has even more questions. Suddenly a fruit seller approaches him, informing him that she has the best ripe apples that taste like honey. Ojin asks her what this place is, and she assumes that he is a traveler, since his clothes look very strange. After this, she tells him that he is entering the Belmore region, which is located south of Baron Doyle's estate. Ojin realizes that this dragon is a complete idiot, and does not realize that there are different worlds in which people live. The merchant assumes that Ojin comes from some little-known village, and therefore decides not to focus on it. A few moments later, there is an incredible roar, causing a large number of boxes to fall to the ground. An unknown mammal picks up these boxes and dumps their contents into its huge mouth. Ojin sees a giant lop-eared rabbit named Elizabeth who eats uncontrollably when stressed. Although this sight looks quite cute, it is better not to stand in its path, as it can crush you with its paws. The remaining passers-by begin to run away, and the merchants try to hide their products so that the giant rabbit doesn't eat them. Ojin is surprised by how calmly monsters are treated in this world, and the merchant explains that it is Lord Belmore's personal pet. Ojin questions the wisdom of calling such a gigantic monster a mere pet, but is advised to flee. Ojin suddenly turns around and hears the loud, piercing cry of a miserable child who doesn't know what to do. A poor girl loses her mother, and now finds herself in grave danger when a giant rabbit appears in front of her. As it turns out, this rabbit is apparently omnivorous, and is willing to try even a living creature to cope with its stress. Ojin wonders what's going on here and realizes that a rabbit clearly shouldn't be acting like this. He realizes that he has never heard of rabbits trying to eat anyone alive, and decides to act immediately. In just 2 jumps, he finds himself in the right place, and dashes forward to save the girl from mortal danger. After this, he rolls for several meters along the pavement, receiving several bruises. But for him, this does not matter at all. He looks at the girl in surprise, checking if everything is okay with her, and at the same time trying to understand what is happening here. He is happy that he manages to save the child, but soon realizes that it is too early to rejoice, as the rabbit continues to attack. Ojin realizes that he is acting too slowly, and that now they both could die here through his own fault. However, after just a few moments, he realizes that the dam owner is to blame for everything, who was unable to keep an eye on his animal in time. He reflects that if someone chooses to release a giant animal in public, they have a responsibility to take care of it and control it with a leash. The next moment, the magic pendant reads his wish and releases a gigantic stream of energy towards the rabbit. Elizabeth stops in surprise and tries to understand what kind of strange magic is emitting a frightening hum. Before she can even process what's happening, a giant magical belt wraps around her ears. Ojin himself doesn't understand how he can do something like this, and looks in amazement at the mystical leash in his hands. The rabbit freezes for a moment, trying to figure out what's happening, and Ojin stands rooted to the spot. The townspeople, watching a man tame a giant rabbit, assume that he is a sorcerer. The merchant's younger sister asks her if he is a sorcerer, to which she replies that he looks like a very ordinary wanderer. Meanwhile, Ojin realizes that he caught his opponent at the most opportune moment, but still does not understand what exactly happened. Suddenly, a short aristocrat runs out of the crowd and asks the monster why she isn't bothering his father. After this, he turns to his servants and declares that they were unable to properly keep an eye on even the rabbit. He then turns cheerfully to Elizabeth and tells her that they should go for a walk and stroll together. Suddenly he discovers with horror that someone has dared to tie up his dear rabbit and deprive him of the ability to move. His gaze immediately falls on Ojin, who continues to hold the leash, thereby paralyzing the giant rabbit. The aristocrat furiously asks what he's even planning to do with his baby, but Ojin explains that otherwise someone could die. The aristocrat declares that this is impossible, since his little girl is not capable of such a thing, and demands that this disgusting thing be removed. Ojin realizes that this is another type of owner that he doesn't like at all, and wonders why he doesn't just stick his head in the rabbit's mouth. The aristocrat continues to shower him with angry threats, and in the heat of the moment, asks if he really wants to die. At this moment, ordinary citizens watching what is happening feel incredible satisfaction that someone is finally putting him in his place. Meanwhile, Ojin notices something strange about the rabbit's appearance, and decides to take a closer look. Quite quickly he discovers small bald spots on the monster's body, and realizes that something is clearly wrong here. The aristocrat angrily declares that he should keep his opinion to himself, since possession itself is the highest good. After this, Ojin turns to the Baron and explains that domestic rabbits are not taken out for walks, and if they are, then only not to crowded places. He asks if she self-harms or displays any other kind of aggression, and the aristocrat confirms that such things happen. Ojin explains that this is one of the symptoms of stress and warns that if they continue in this manner, they will lead her to become seriously ill. The aristocrat loudly expresses indignation and asks if he is really being threatened, since Ojin recommends stopping such walks. He wonders how his animal can exercise then, and Ojin wonders how she managed to get so fat in the first place. He also notes that he sees the owner's love for his pet, but emphasizes that rabbits are very sensitive animals. He adds that pampering alone is not enough, as proper upbringing, proper nutrition and care are much more important. The aristocrat listens to the protagonist with surprise and admits that he really loves rabbits and thinks he knows a lot about them. He also shares a personal and painful story of being looked down upon and told that only ladies own rabbits. He then asks if Ojin's work has anything to do with rabbits, and Ojin confirms it. The aristocrat claps his hands and orders the butler to bring everything they have here. Lord Belmore's butler hands Ojin a small bag, explaining that it doesn't contain much, but it's all they have. Lord Belmore himself, with his characteristic sentimentality, turns to his rabbit and asks her for forgiveness. Ojin is also asked to check on her health from time to time, and Ojin notes that this is not the best idea. After waiting for Lord Belmore and his retinue to finally leave with Elizabeth, the townspeople realize that it is time to disperse. They surround Ojin Kim and happily report that the sorcerer is behaving simply amazingly and managed to save the city. They enthusiastically add that thanks to him, they can now conduct business calmly and offer him all sorts of hotels. Ojin claims he has no money, but is reminded that the Lord has just rewarded him with a huge amount of coins. Ojin looks closely at the gifts presented to him and realizes that this gold shines very brightly. However, this is not enough to calm his skepticism, and he decides to test the coin with his teeth to determine its authenticity. The townspeople, who are not familiar with this method of testing, look at it with surprise and explain that it is inedible. The girl approaches him sympathetically and notes that even if something is shiny, it doesn't mean it should be put in your mouth. Meanwhile, Ojin is busy thinking that he has struck gold and is wondering how much the building is worth. He is very happy and understands that he will open a second veterinary clinic right here if he can get out of debt. After some time, they find themselves in a dark room in which several candles are burning. creating a mysterious atmosphere. The mysterious young man addresses his guests and thanks them for having managed to reach the end of his trials. He says that everyone gathered here finds themselves here after completing very difficult tasks that require ingenuity. This person also expresses hope that one of those present will still be chosen. After a short pause, the young man, who turns out to be O-jin Kim, announces that it is time to begin the test. He pompously declares that this is a game of life and death, although in reality, it is all just a regular interview to select personnel for the clinic. Some time ago, Lord Belmore asked him if he needed a house, money, and land in order to settle here. The opening of the clinic's branch goes surprisingly smoothly, as the local lord simply gives him the property. Ojin understands that the most important things in this life are the connections that allow him to open up paths that are inaccessible to others. He only needs to tell the lord about his desire to settle here, and everything necessary for the clinic will be personally prepared for him. Ojin starts cleaning and realizes that there are too many rabbit tracks left, but it doesn't matter since he's not paying for it. Now he owns his own clinic, and all that remains for him is to ensure its prosperity through conscientious performance of his duties. However, he has little information about this world, and he does not understand what the dragons are capable of, one of which sends him here. Ojin is well aware that he needs someone to ask about this world, so he puts up an ad. The current interview at the protagonist's clinic begins, and Ojin asks all candidates to introduce themselves. One of the boys calls himself Thomas, and explains that he is the second son in a family of 3 sons and 2 daughters. Ojin reflects on how the child lacks any individuality, and is unlikely to be able to help him in this matter. He then turns to another candidate, who calls himself Philip, and says that his family has a long history of interacting with animals. Ojin clarifies what exactly is meant by such interaction, after which the young man calmly explains that he comes from a family of butchers. Ojin immediately classifies this man as completely unsuitable for the job. He reflects on the fact that this world is full of weirdos and therefore one must be careful, and then turns to number 3. Looking at him, he realizes that this guy looks like he's ready to gut someone. However, he decides not to judge by appearances and asks why he looks like he is very nervous. The young man suddenly asks if he is the wizard, after which he expresses a wish to be used as a rug. Ojin comes to the conclusion that from now on, he will definitely judge people by their appearance, since this approach has never failed him yet. The woman, observing the strange behavior of the man, who is getting closer and closer, suddenly intervenes. She approaches the director and asks if it is her turn to introduce herself and tell how she can be of help. Ojin asks if now is the right time for this, trying to get rid of the annoying interlocutor. The girl asks if he allows her to deal with the situation on her own, and he immediately agrees. The next moment, the girl delivers a quick and sharp blow right to the madman's face to bring him to his senses. The blow is so strong that the man falls to the ground and cannot recover for a long time. Looking calmly at the main character, the girl says that her name is Selena, and that she would be happy to work with him. She adds that she is an animal care specialist and can perform some basic procedures. Ojin understands that such a valuable employee, who has also rendered him a serious service, cannot be missed, and immediately hires her. This is how, quite simply, an assistant is hired at Ojin Kim's pet clinic. After a while, the weather improves, and the warm dawn sun rises over the city again. Ojin is genuinely happy about this start, and realizes that his new workplace brings him a sense of comfort and stability. However, along with this, one problem arises: the assistant does not show up for work on time. After some thought, he comes to the conclusion that he is hiring her too hastily, and suggests that new advertisements should be posted. After a while, there's a knock on the door, and he realizes that his assistant, who has most likely already been fired, is coming to see him. He opens the door and asks Selena if she slept well and how long ago she had lunch. However, in front of him is a completely different person, who is happy to hear what he has heard, and asks if they are offering him lunch. Ojin looks at him in surprise and asks who he even is, not immediately realizing who is in front of him. However, after some time, understanding comes to him, and he seats his first client at a table, offering water or tea. Ojin is happy to have the first customer come to this branch, as this is the first step towards paying the bills. Smiling, he realizes that he is overly focused on success, as he has already analyzed all the mistakes of previous clinics. He briefly recalls one of his sessions, when he informed the dog's owner of the need to brush its teeth regularly. The very resourceful owner then asked if this was too complicated a solution, expecting some simpler way to fix the problem. Ojin doesn't hide his passive aggression and constantly takes it out on people he doesn't like. This is why he often receives bad reviews, and his clinic is rapidly losing popularity. Ojin realizes that this time he intends to become a winner in life and constantly control his temperament. Meanwhile, the client shows him his lizard named Pudge, and explains that he thinks it is very cute. Ojin realizes that after meeting the giant rabbit, he feels like all the animals in this world are strange, but this specimen is not. Ojin asks the owner why he carries the animal in his pocket when there should be a special cage for it. The client explains that he carries the pet around with him because he finds it incredibly cute, and points at the lizard. Ojin doesn't have time to contain his indignation, and is about to grab the table to turn it over. However, his self-esteem and logic immediately stop him, reminding him that he must be stronger. Ojin decides not to ask any unnecessary questions, and inquires as to why the owner decided to bring his pet here. The client explains that the pet is not sick, but appears very weak and is sensitive to cold. He also mentions that he once accidentally grabbed its tail and it fell off, but Ojin explains that this is also normal. After this, the owner decides not to ask any more questions and simply asks the veterinarian to treat his pet for any possible ailment. Ojin understands that one cannot rely only on the owner's word, and that a full inspection is necessary first. He begins to examine the animal closely, and discovers that its scales are chipping off too easily. Ojin continues to examine the skin of the bizarre creature, and realizes that it looks quite unusual. After a short pause, he reports that the little lizard appears to be suffering from a condition called dissectus. The client immediately warns that he should be careful when touching, as his pet may be aggressive. Ojin clarifies what exactly he means, and only then notices that they are preparing to release a stream of fire in his direction. Ojin realizes that he is moving too slowly to react to what is happening. After a few moments, the pet opens its mouth and creates a small fireball, which begins to rapidly gain speed. Luckily for Ojin, Selena arrives in time and manages to push him aside so that he doesn't get burned. Turning to him, she informs him that his head was nearly burned by the salamander's flames, adding that this poses a serious threat. Looking closer, she realizes that he didn't take the collision with the wall very well because she overdid it. Ojin sadly notes that getting burned would be a much smaller problem than his current situation. Ojin understands that the first thing to understand is that this lizard cannot be examined with bare hands due to its peculiarities. Selena continues her conversation with the client and asks where he found this salamander and how long he has been keeping it. The client says he picked up a salamander on the other side of the mountain and immediately realized it was love at first sight, so he took it home with him. After this, he asks if she is jealous of such an unusual pet, but Selena replies that this is not entirely true. Looking intently at the client, she explains that catching salamanders in that area is illegal, and that the creatures are not domesticated. She reminds him that their population is extremely small, so their capture is prohibited, after which the client asks if he can still keep it. Selena states that it is indeed illegal, but he shouldn't worry too much about it. She explains that while it might work to indicate that the salamander is being brought in solely for medical treatment, the animal will still have to be returned. The client begins to cry and claims that he will never give up his beloved pet that he picked up. As he heads for the exit, he demands that they accept the situation and just let them love each other. Ojin wonders what is wrong with the man, and Selena suggests that he is deciding to return home. Ojin states that such behavior is unacceptable, and reprimands her for not detaining him and letting him go with the pet. Pointing to the door, he orders her to go immediately after this man and bring him back here even by force. Selena nods and understands that her director turns out to be a very serious person who is not averse to decisiveness. Trying to find this man, she heads into the city and quickly finds herself in a crowded market. The merchant reflects that life becomes much more pleasant after the Lord's rabbit stops appearing in the area. She hopes that while these people are busy with the Lord's affairs, no destruction is foreseen. Suddenly she notices a frightened man running across the square, followed by another girl in a hood. Ojin also follows her to ensure the capture of this scoundrel who could harm himself and others. Selena runs very fast and is able to catch up with even the most desperate fugitives. Ojin hardly has even a drop of that kind of stamina, so he has to operate at the very limits of his abilities. The merchant watches them in surprise, trying to understand what all this means and what they are trying to achieve with all this running around. She notes that she has no idea what is going on here, but for her own safety, she prefers not to show curiosity. The client mentally wonders why everyone in this world is trying to take his pet away from him, since, in his opinion, he has done nothing wrong. He convinces himself not to worry, and believes that what is happening is a test for both of them. But he is confident that no one will be able to separate them, no matter what. Ojin begins to lose patience and orders him to stop immediately if he values his life and his knees. After a while, everyone is forced to take a break, as Ojin's stamina runs out completely. Selena watches him phlegmatically and remarks that he should train more often to avoid such troubles. She also clarifies whether the salamander is actually unable to molt due to illness. Ojin confirms that this is indeed the case, explaining that due to the condition, She has already accumulated 2 or 3 layers of old skin that need to be removed. Selena notes that in that case they need to hurry, as the situation is quite dangerous. She adds that if the salamander cannot molt, the flame will build up inside it, and when it reaches a critical concentration, the consequences will be extremely severe. Selena assures that this will lead to a grand rampage, which will end only when the creature's energy is completely depleted. From her point of view, rampaging salamanders are extremely dangerous and capable of reducing the entire area to ruins, not only harming their owner. Ojin realizes that he has no time to rest or feel sorry for himself, as too much is at stake. Meanwhile, the client makes his way to his home, constantly looking back and noticing that no one is following him anymore. He happily tells his pet that everything is fine, and that now no one can separate them, despite the cruelty of this world. After this, he decides to capture the moment in song, and starts looking for paper to write down the poems on. He reflects that inspiration has finally struck, and that it will be a true masterpiece if they can convey eternal love through song. All this time, while the bard thinks only about his meaningless songs, the salamander gets worse and worse. It's clear from her eyes that her mood is gradually turning aggressive and clearly has no intention of stopping. Turning around, the bard asks his pet what he thinks of the poetry, which he considers to be of such high quality. At that very moment, a powerful explosion was heard, which immediately made him realize that he should have listened to Ojin's words. A moment after the explosion, the bard tries to cough as the shockwave kicks up a huge amount of dust. On top of everything else, the entire house is gradually starting to catch fire. But the bard still doesn't fully understand what the problem is. Turning to his pet, he asks him what happened and why he decided to do such a thing. He assumes that the pet is angry about something, but he still believes that this is not a reason to start such a serious fire. After this, the bard pulls the pet along with him, believing that it is dangerous here, and that they need to get out as quickly as possible. However, the angry salamander realizes that she no longer intends to tolerate such disdainful treatment. After this, she opens her mouth and prepares to create another fireball to direct towards the bard. The bard looks at his pet in amazement and still cannot believe his own eyes. He convinces himself that it is just a joke, since his dear pet would never spit fire at him. Selena and Ojin come to the aid of this naive man in time, who would otherwise have become a victim of his own stupidity. Ojin struggles to hold the fiery creature's mouth shut so it doesn't continue its rampage. He asks his assistant if this means that the creature will now deliberately attack people. Selena claims that the salamander has completely lost its mind and that it needs to be calmed down immediately before it is too late. Ojin understands that taming a creature composed almost entirely of concentrated energy will be extremely difficult. His head is racing with options on how to deal with this misfortune. In response to these thoughts, the necklace hanging around his neck responds and begins to slowly pulsate with energy. Ojin focuses on wanting to put out the flames around him, and suddenly a small fire extinguisher appears in his hand. Ojin only now realizes how the necklace he was given works and decides to act immediately. Without standing on ceremony with the salamander, he points the fire extinguisher straight at its face and pulls the lever. Salamander is taken aback by how easily the fire can be extinguished, as she has never encountered anything like a fire extinguisher before. To be on the safe side, Ojin releases another stream of special liquid to finally calm her violent temper. After this, he looks at the fire extinguisher and realizes that this pendant can be extremely useful if he learns to use it correctly. Selena notes that the situation was resolved unexpectedly quickly and asks if everything is okay with him. Meanwhile, the bard replays what happened in his head and realizes that it was a truly serious incident. He convinces himself that if it weren't for the massive outburst, his pet would never have attacked him, and therefore everything will be fine in the end. He happily notes that he will now be able to better care for his pet and continue to exist alongside him. Ojin asks him in surprise if that's all he can say about what happened. The bard replies that there is no need to worry, since his feelings for this animal have not changed. He will restore the house and continue to take care of it. Ojin explains to him in a raised voice that if things had gone on any longer, the neighboring houses would have caught fire, and someone could have been seriously injured. The bard tries to calm the protagonist, and explains that this is precisely why he talks about the need to take better care of the pet. Ojin realizes that in front of him is a completely hopeless person who is completely unaware of what actually happened. He explains to him that it is impossible to raise a wild animal in such cramped conditions, since it has its own natural habitat. He adds that the worst thing you can do is remove a creature from its natural environment just because it seems cute. He also reminds that something similar could happen again, and that in such a case the owner will clearly not be able to cope on his own. The bard looks down and begins to cry, realizing that he is truly ashamed of his selfish act. Ojin gently strokes the salamander to further calm it down, and decides to sum up what happened. He states that one should not fill life with interference based solely on attachment, as this only leads to negative consequences. The room falls silent as the bard is forced to seriously consider how selfishly he has behaved. After some time, they still head to the guard districts, where the bard found his pet in order to release him into the wild. Ojin notes that now, after molting, the salamander looks quite healthy, and its coloring seems harmonious. They also notice that she somehow managed to grow several centimeters quite quickly. Ojin wonders how such a large body could have fit in such a tiny skin before, but Selena cannot answer. The bard looks at his pet with sadness and realizes that he will no longer need his help, since he has grown up so quickly. After this, he tries to instill hope in himself by thinking about the fact that his pet is returning to the wild, and that this is an important and exciting moment for him. He wishes him happiness, and notes that he is letting him go, because he truly loves him very much. Ojin covers his ears, irritated by the stream of feigned pathos associated with parting with a creature found only 2 days ago. The bard says that in his heart, they will remain together forever, while the salamander calmly runs away without waiting for the monologue to end. The bard looks sadly after his pet and does not understand how he could leave without even saying goodbye to him. Selena advises him not to be upset, since salamanders do not understand the concept of owners and perceive things completely differently. She tries to console him, explaining that the salamander still perceived him only as a source of food, and not as a close being. The bard begins to cry even harder as a large salamander climbs up onto a small ledge to look at them. Raising her head upwards, she prepares to create a giant fireball for some unspecified purpose. Suddenly the heroes hear a crash, and the bard, whose face is almost completely covered in tears and snot, looks up in surprise. As a sign of gratitude for the help in its release, the salamander creates a large fireworks display in the sky. The bard is deeply impressed by this sight and understands that his pet is thus thanking him for the help he provided. Ojin is amazed that a simple animal can imitate pyrotechnic effects using fire. Meanwhile, Bard continues to rejoice that his pet has decided to express his gratitude in such a phenomenal and impressive way. After some time, he gathers a large musical group in the main square of the city to perform a new number. He immediately begins to play his stringed instrument, intending to win the hearts of the listeners. During his journey home, he composes a poem about the great sorcerer who helped him and all the inhabitants of this city. To make the right impression, he specially invites the Star Girls Choir to accompany the performance with a dance. The bard continues the song, telling how this wizard was truly amazing and managed to save his heart. Then specially invited musicians enter the musical composition, performing a solo part on the drums. Selena tells Ojin that he seems to be a very popular bard in the area, but Ojin finds that hard to believe. Suddenly the townspeople begin to discuss how incredible the new song seems to them, and they are especially impressed by the image of the wizard it sings about. Ojin realizes that this could be great publicity for his clinic, and begins to praise the bard's musical talent. Just a few days after the song's public performance, the pet clinic is literally overflowing with clients. They all knock on the door, hoping that it will open soon, and Selena jokingly remarks that with such an influx of visitors, she already wants to quit. Thus begins an era of unprecedented excitement caused by the flow of visitors who must somehow be served. Nevertheless, Ojin manages to examine quite a large number of pets in just half a day. However, it cannot be said that this does not in any way affect his fatigue and ability to make balanced and rational decisions. Despite this, he habitually asks the patient to come back next week to monitor the recovery process. Selena tells him that he won't last that long, to which he replies that he needs to earn money while he can. 2 months after his arrival in this world, thanks in large part to the bard, his second clinic is experiencing a massive influx of visitors. Even for a hard worker like Ojin Kim, the first few days are tough, but the rewards are significant. This money very quickly gives Ojin strength, and he continues to work with renewed zeal, as if drawing energy from another world. By examining patients, he learns more and more about this world, so his work also has its own less obvious positive aspects. He learns that even here, cats and dogs are the most common companions for people. Although their appearance is slightly different from what he is used to, it still gives him a certain basis for research. Selena informs him that another patient has arrived, and adds that he will be the last one for today. Ojin asks her what kind of animal it is, and she replies that it is a breed of shaman, which is primarily used for hunting. Selena explains that they have recently become popular pets, but due to their aggression towards everyone except their owner, they are often abandoned. Selena adds that they grow quite large, and their claws and teeth are very sharp, so you need to be especially careful when handling them. Ojin knows this sounds quite ferocious, but still allows visitors in to examine the animal. As soon as the owner opens the carrier, a small dog no more than a few months old appears in front of him. Selena says that during the recording it was mentioned that the patient was only a few months old, but she forgot to mention this detail beforehand. The owner reports that the animal has been limping since yesterday and suggests that it may have been injured. Ojin decides to examine the puppy and tries to make out its paws, as it looks like a dense ball of fur. Ojin speculates that puppies usually have good joints, so it's likely that there's some mechanical damage to the paw. After taking a closer look, he discovers a small splinter lodged in the pad of the paw, causing the poor creature severe pain. Ojin quickly takes the tweezers and removes the splinter, noting that everything should be fine now that the source of the pain has been removed. After this, he decides to disinfect the little puppy's paw, and this completes the treatment procedure. Ojin looks at the contented creature and realizes that in front of him is a living ball of wool with incredible activity. This brings a genuine smile to his face as he feels joy seeing happy and contented animals after treatment. Selena notices this, but decides not to say anything until the little dog's owner leaves the clinic. The woman expresses her sincere gratitude to Ojin for helping her in such a difficult situation, when there was almost no hope left. Ojin bids her farewell, then rests his head on the table and notes that they have finally finished the reception, which cannot but please him. Selena looks at him closely and says that he looked very happy during the last appointment. She asks him if it was because he found the puppy adorable, or because the workday was ending. Selena explains her point by noting that she rarely sees him so happy with anything other than significant financial income. Ojin replies that none of the patients were in serious condition today, so today can be considered a walk in the park. As he reflects, he realizes that the hardest part of being a veterinarian is constantly witnessing animals suffer. He notes that the more you worry about these animals, the more it torments the doctor himself, and that in such a matter it is necessary to be able to detach emotionally. However, Ojin realizes that he has completely failed this task and quickly begins to take it out on the owners, who are behaving irresponsibly. Putting the memories aside, he gets up from the table and says that it's time for them to close up and go rest until tomorrow. He also notes that there were quite a lot of visitors today, so the day can be considered a success in financial terms. He adds that the sun will set soon, and at that moment, he notices a strange pale man in the window who is looking at him eerily. This man calls out to the protagonist in a sad voice, explaining that he needs not just help, but the help of a professional sorcerer. Ojin asks Selena if she can exorcise spirits, and she takes the broom, noting that she has a few ideas on how to get rid of him. The vengeful spirit suddenly opens the window and continues to repeat the protagonist's name, causing him to become very scared. After this, the spirit grabs him and begins to pull him towards itself, but Ojin is unable to resist due to extreme fatigue. A few moments later, he finds himself on the street, after which he is quickly carried away in an unknown direction. Selena is genuinely surprised that spirits are able to interact with the material world and move so quickly while holding another person. They are transported several kilometers away from the city to a small forest area, where the ghost decides to stop. It soon becomes clear that this ghost is an ordinary person who is simply following orders from his superiors. He apologizes to Ojin, explaining that he didn't expect him to have such a hard time climbing the hill due to his extreme fatigue. Ojin asks his unexpected visitor who he is, emphasizing that he doesn't look like a ghost at all. The man replies that his name is Sven, and that he is an employee of the city administration in this area. After this, he begins to bow and says that he was told that Ojin was able to calm even the Lord's rabbit. He then suddenly asks him if he could catch a stray dog, leaving Ojin genuinely confused. Selena suddenly appears out of nowhere and says that they are not an animal rescue team. Sven replies that they are their only hope as they have very little time left. Selena asks him what he means, and the man explains that 2 months ago the dog took over territory in the middle of the mountains. He annoyedly states that they are planning to build a highway there, but the dog has not yet been caught because it is too fast. Ojin asks him in surprise what will happen if they can't catch the dog before the work begins. Sven replies that the city authorities are planning to send local troops who will catch the dog in a different way. He sadly emphasizes that, translated into human language, this means that the soldiers will simply shoot the animal. He tries to hurry them, saying that there is not much time left, so they need to act quickly. Bowing before them, he begs them to agree to help, emphasizing that a lot depends on it. Ojin realizes that he can't abandon the poor animal and realizes that he needs to make a decision quickly, so he agrees. Scratching his head, he asks the desperate butler where the dog is at the moment. He explains that he is a veterinarian and has never caught an animal before, so he needs to at least look at the dog to make a plan. Sven immediately starts beaming with happiness and says that it's not far at all and that you only need to walk a couple of 100 meters. Ojin clarifies that he has not yet agreed to catch this dog, but Selena understands that he has already made this decision. Sven takes them to the right place and says that the dog has always hung around somewhere here and never left this area. Selena and Ojin stare at the dog as it suddenly appears and starts making aggressive noises. This dog doesn't like uninvited guests, so he immediately starts baring his teeth, trying to drive them away as quickly as possible. Ojin carefully examines the dog's appearance and asks Selena what the chances are that this is the dog he thinks it is. Selena confirms his assumption, saying that it is a dog of the shaman breed, known for its aggressiveness. Selena reminds him from her story that most people got these dogs because they were fashionable, not realizing how difficult they are to maintain. She adds that, judging by the collar, a huge number of such dogs were soon simply abandoned by their owners. Ojin tries to track the smallest details in the condition and appearance of this dog, in order to avoid mistakes. He recalls that this dog has been here for several months, and, judging by its appearance, it is unlikely that it has been fed properly. Suddenly, a loud and strange sound begins to resonate in the air, spreading over several tens of meters. Ojin wonders what the sound is, and then decides to take a step forward to get closer to the animal. He hopes that these sounds will not affect the condition of the lost dog, which already looks aggressive. However, as soon as he takes this small step, the dog immediately begins to behave even more aggressively and rushes to attack. Ojin tries to understand what could have provoked such a sudden surge of aggression from the dog, but it is too late to retreat. Selena understands that she must not allow her boss to be injured or have any more serious consequences. She quickly grabs both companions and leads them away, explaining that the situation is extremely dangerous and tactics need to change. Ojin objects, saying that you can't turn your back and run away from an aggressive dog, but Selena states that there are no other options. Ojin continues to be indignant, noting that such behavior will only provoke the dog to chase them until he catches them. He adds that they need to distract the dog so they can regroup, when he suddenly notices that it has stopped. Selena stares at the dog, who suddenly turns away, completely losing interest in his victims. Ojin wonders why the dog decided to stop, as it is a hunting breed that usually does not abandon its prey. He emphasizes that they are looking at an enraged hunting animal, and yet it has returned to its original place. Taking a closer look, he notices that the dog constantly stays near a small cave and seems to be guarding something. He realizes that the dog has returned to the same place where he was originally when they first arrived. Selena notes that it is extremely difficult to predict a dog's thoughts, and Sven adds that the dog always attacks people according to the same scenario. He also says that there is a never-ending stream of complaints coming from the nearby town. Ojin suddenly gets the idea that everything that is happening could be part of something much bigger, and he decides to ask more questions. He asks what kind of complaints these were, and is told in response that they concerned the appearance of a ferocious dog in the mountains. The complaints also stated that the animal was dangerous, but Ojin clarified whether anyone had actually been bitten. Sven initially finds this question naive, as the answer seems obvious to him. However, after some time he thinks about it, and realizes that he actually cannot remember a single such case. Having carefully checked all the nooks and crannies of his memory, he says that not a single complaint about bites has been received so far. Ojin turns to Selena, reminding her of her words about dogs of this breed being very loyal to their owners and incredibly devoted. Selena nods to him, then asks if he has any good ideas. The next day, Ojin and Selena go into town to find someone very important. Selena asks him what they are doing here, and Ojin tells her that their task is to find the dog's owner. Selena says that it will be much easier to catch the tramp as quickly as possible using traps and food. Ojin expresses doubts about this plan, saying that, in his view, food alone will not be enough. Selena asks him why he thinks that, and then he asks her to remember how skinny the dog was when they saw him. He adds that this is a hunting breed that could, in any case, get its food while in the forest. From his point of view, this dog is kept in one place by something much more serious than hunger. He suggests that it may well be an order from the owner, who has promised to return. He notes that this breed's devotion to its owner is absolute, which is why the dog still guards this place. Ojin says with irritation that in the places where he comes from, there were also people who got rid of dogs in this way. That's why he says that once they find this man, they're going to deal with him seriously first, and then take the dog with them. He adds that the man should see the condition of the abandoned dog. They decide to ask ordinary residents about the whereabouts of this dog's owner, but no one can give a clear answer. Even children, who usually know more than ordinary people, cannot help them in any way. Turning to old people also turns out to be a bad idea, since they cannot suggest anything useful. After some time, despair overwhelms Ojin, and he tries to figure out what he should do next. He suggests that the owner might be unnaturally cruel, and Selena suggests that everyone in this town hates the stray dog. Suddenly, a figure appears in front of them, who informs them that no one knows the owner of the stray dog, so they cannot help. Coming closer, the girl says that they are the first people who ever ask about Mr. Jack. Ojin looks up encouraged and asks the girl if she knows the dog's owner and where he is now. The girl asks them to follow her, after which she takes them to a small house located outside the city. Ojin says that Mr. Jack has gone too far, and the girl explains that this is why no one knows anything about him. Ojin knocks on the door, wondering if Mr. Jack lived there alone with his dog, but the girl corrects him. She says that Mr. Jack is not here, but in a completely different place, and points her finger there. Ojin follows her in surprise and freezes for a moment, realizing that the situation is not going well. A grave appears before him, and he wonders what it all means, although in reality, he understands everything at once. The girl says that Mr. Jack died while on a mission several months ago. Ojin clarifies when exactly this happened, and realizes that the date roughly coincides with the appearance of complaints about the dog. The girl says that people around her continue to blame the dog's owner, but Mr. Jack did not abandon his dog. She explains with a heavy sigh that he simply couldn't come back for it because of the tragedy that happened. She also says that she tried to take the dog, but all her attempts were in vain, after which she mentions that the dog's name is Max. She asks them to try to help the animal, emphasizing that this dog does not deserve such treatment from people. Ojin looks down and realizes that he was too hasty in his anger at his master, due to his own bad habit of jumping to conclusions. He takes a few steps towards the grave and clenches his fists, trying to cope with the pangs of conscience. After a short pause, he bends over the grave and says that he wishes this man to rest in peace. He also notes that he is terribly sorry that he allowed himself to make such a hasty and erroneous conclusion about this man. After a symbolic pause, he makes a promise that he will save the dog at any cost as a sign of respect for its owner. After some time, the sun begins to set, but the heroes still have time to come up with a plan. Sven meets several travelers and asks them why they have arrived so early, noting that he was only expecting them tomorrow. The armed soldiers respond that their previous mission is completed, so they are slightly ahead of schedule. One of them adds that they don't necessarily have to put off this task until tomorrow, since they have no desire to linger here. The soldiers say they are determined to deal with the wild animal right now, stressing that it will be easy. He adds that people hate the dog anyway, so it's unlikely anyone will mourn the loss of such a creature. From his point of view, it doesn't matter whether it happens today or a day later, since nothing will change. Meanwhile, Ojin enters the house that used to belong to Mr. Jack to take a closer look at it. He smells medicinal herbs and assumes that the man was either a forester or a herbalist. Selena suggests that they take something with the owner's scent, and they discover a small set of clothes. Ojin also says that upon inspection, they find a small frame with a photograph. Looking closer, he discovers that the photo depicts Mr. Jack himself and his pet Max. Ojin is very touched by the fact that this herbalist cared so much for his pet and treasured him. He wonders what could have happened when Selena suddenly makes a suggestion. She points to the wall where an image of this creature, or rather, a living plant, is displayed. Ojin wonders what it is, and Selena asks him if he has heard of such a plant and its special cry before. He adds that this plant is very rare and difficult to collect, which is why all herbalists dream of finding it, because it is extremely expensive. Gradually, everything comes together to form a coherent picture, and Ojin begins to understand what exactly happened that day. Looking at the photograph, he mentally says that now everything has fallen into place, and he knows what exactly happened. Meanwhile, clouds are gathering over the forest and the sun is setting, heralding the onset of a dark night. Max lies on the cold ground in the hope that his owner, whom he has been waiting for so long, will soon return. Hearing the unfamiliar sounds, he stuck out his tongue and happily wiggled his tail, anticipating the return of his precious owner. For a while he is transported into the past, remembering that on that day there was a heavy rain, and they took shelter in this cave. His master lit a fire and said that it was worth waiting for the rain to subside, since there was no point in rushing. Max lay down near the fire to regain his strength and dry his thick fur. Mr. Jack hurried to help him and took out a small towel with which to wipe off the wet fur. He happily noted that it was great that he had brought a towel, which would allow him to dry off quickly. He asks Max to stand still, explaining that if he stays wet, it will only lead to illness. However, Max was very playful and immediately began to lick his owner's hands as a sign of gratitude. After this, he also placed his paws directly on his owner's body, which is why the old man called him a little rascal. However, such behavior only amused him, so he laughed heartily at his dear dog. Afterwards, he said that he was very lucky to have found such a safe haven where he could take refuge. He added that he had no idea the cave existed until he discovered strange plants deep within it. He was very surprised when he realized that in front of him was the precious mandrake that he had been looking for so long. He carefully analyzed the flowers, the shape of the leaves, and came to the conclusion that there could be no mistake here. He joyfully thanks the heavens, saying that he could not imagine that he would see a mandrake not only in books. He understands that there is no time to admire, since he needs to immediately go home for tools. Max immediately made it clear that he would like to go with his master, despite the fact that he was still not dry. However, Mr. Jack immediately stops him, saying that he can handle it alone, since the journey is not far. He promises Max that he will be back very soon, so the dog should wait a little, and everything will be fine. Smiling, he sincerely declares that today is indeed a very happy day, and that luck has smiled on him. The dog continues to guard the cave in the hope that its owner will return very soon. Mr. Jack is being prudent because if he waited until the rain stopped, something bad might happen to him. However, he underestimated how dangerous long rains can be in mountainous areas and the consequences. Too late, he heard a loud roar that heralded the beginning of a landslide from which there was no escape. Unfortunately, this man's fate was unenviable, and he died in a landslide. Nature is cruel and does not choose who will become a victim of weather conditions today. Time passes and the fire has already gone out. But the owner, for obvious reasons, was still unable to return to his dog. Max continues to guard the cave, as this was the last order he received from his master. He waits for a long time in the hope that his owner will return soon. But these dreams are not destined to come true. Looking at the rainbow that appeared after the rain, he begins to whine sadly, missing his owner. However, the owner never comes, and the dog does not leave the cave to try to find him. After some time, she is found by travelers who are interested in what this dog is doing there. They feel sympathy and pity for him, realizing that he has probably been abandoned and has been living here for several weeks. At first, they even try to feed him in the hope that he won't die of hunger. However, as soon as they tried to approach him, the dog immediately began to bare his teeth in order to drive away the uninvited guests. The travelers immediately realized that it was better not to mess with this dog, as it was very dangerous and cruel. They still couldn't understand why the dog was abandoned, but they decided not to go any closer, because the dog's teeth were very sharp. Max continues his existence near the cave, devoting all his attention and strength to its protection. He patiently waits for his owner and drives away anyone who accidentally enters his field of vision and approaches a dangerous distance. Over time, his coat begins to look worse and worse because no one can take care of him. However, this time his fate is entirely in the hands of evil people who came here to kill him. The soldiers quickly take up firing range and carefully examine the dog, trying to assess its power. As soon as the soldiers approach, he immediately begins to grin, hoping that this will be enough to drive them away. Meanwhile, soldiers load special ammunition to tranquilize the dog and then finish it off. Sven tries to stop them, saying that he has already called someone who can help save the animal, because this dog did not hurt anyone. However, the soldiers tell him that they did not come to listen to heart-rending stories about dogs. He emphasizes that he understands perfectly well that this dog probably has a sad past, because abandoned animals are not guilty of anything. However, they are only here to ensure the safety of the residents, and for that to happen, this dog must disappear. Max begins to realize for a moment that he cannot cope with the soldiers, and tries to silently accept his fate. To everyone's surprise, someone suddenly places a hand on the soldier's weapon, pulling him away. Selena looks at him with a cold and stern gaze, and says that the soldiers are too hasty in making decisions. She states that they need to save this stray dog, so they should shoot a little later. Suddenly, the man he had been expecting all this time, judging by the smell emanating from him, approaches Max. For a moment he sees Mr. Jack, who asks if the dog has been waiting for him for that long. The man says he's finally come back for him, which makes the dog's tail wag. The dog immediately rushes into Mr. Jack's arms, but it turns out that in front of him is Ojin, who apologizes and says that he is not the one he was expecting. Stroking his head, he says it's time to go home and rest. Night falls over the forests, and one small fawn tries to carefully run away from some danger. He has been running for quite a long time, which is why he is very tired, but he still feels like he is being watched. Nearby, behind the trees, a dark figure gradually moves from tree to tree and watches him. What kind of animal this is still unclear, but it is clear that it is a predator that stalks its prey for a long time. After some time, a loud sound is heard in the forest, which frightens the animals, and the birds, frightened by the sharp noise, fly up. A few days later, a visitor comes to Ojin's clinic and says that their baby is moving too little. Ojin looks at the animal carefully and says that it is incredible, and he has never seen anything like it. Taking a closer look at a hamster named Pin, he notices that he is too fat to move properly. Ojin states that the amount of food must be reduced, otherwise it will lead to serious illnesses. But the owner begins to argue with him. Ojin decides not to waste time on trifles and simply says that the inspection is over, after which Sven comes to him. Max leaves the mountain and goes down to the village after spending a long time near the cave. However, the dog still cannot understand that his owner is no longer there, and he continues to stay near the grave all the time. Luckily, Max was able to open his heart to someone who had cared for him for a long time, and that person turns out to be Sven. Ojin asks if something happened to the attack dog, but he quickly replies that it did not. After this, they place a large box on the table, saying that this is a very important reason why they came. Looking inside, they discover a mandrake, which is sitting in a pot and covered with a special glass flask. Selena says it's a strange plant for this area, as the roots usually go deep into the soil. Sven says that Mr. Jack found this mandrake before he died, and it had been in the ground all this time. They decided to preserve the plant in memory of him and carefully dug it up so as not to damage the living root. However, as soon as they transplanted the mandrake into a pot, it popped out of the ground again and started causing trouble. Sven warns that this plant, in addition to its bad character, can scream non-stop for several days. The entire estate is thrown into chaos by the mandrake, with several people seriously injured. Selena says she has heard of a phenomenon where some plant species react to the environment they are in. Sven notes that fortunately the plant is currently dormant, but as soon as it wakes up, all hell will break loose. With these words, they hand the glass flask to Ojin and ask him to take it to himself and somehow re-educate it. Ojin says he looks after animals and plants, but they reply that this creature is definitely not a plant. Sven claims that it is neither an animal nor a plant, but simply a monster or a demon. But Ojin recommends taking it to a church or a clinic. The mandrake slowly begins to move, signaling to everyone that she will soon wake up. Sven and his comrade quickly leave, saying that they entrust this important matter to Ojin. Ojin angrily says that he has met people who abandon their animals. But this is a plant, and this is too much. Selena explains that the mandrake is a very rare and valuable plant, as its roots can raise a dying person to his feet. Ojin asks what the point is if no one can control the creature. Selena advises him to cover his ears, warning him that the mandrake is waking up and will soon start screaming. Ojin watches closely as the creature opens its eyes and takes a deep breath to let out a loud scream. He closes his eyes, realizing that if he had the big headphones he borrowed in the previous world, it would help. However, as soon as he opens his eyes, he finds the mandrake looking at him with eyes full of adoration. Ojin wonders what's going on, and Selena suggests that the picky mandrake has taken a liking to him. Selena looks closely at his pendant and says that she needs to check something, after which she asks him to take off the jewelry. Ojin takes out the pendant from under his scarf, wondering why he needs to do this. Mandrake reacts to the manipulation of the pendant with even greater enthusiasm, showing her adoration. Ojin asks what's going on, and Selena replies that the mandrake looks happy and starts dancing. Ojin realizes that this plant looks like his friend's toy sunflower that danced and sang. Selena asks Ojin to take the plant to her room, as they will now take care of it like the other animals. After a while, night falls, and Ojin, who lives in the same place where he receives patients, decides to get some sleep. However, his sleep is disturbed by a loud knock on the door and the screams of a woman asking him to come. Ojin, barely opening her eyes, says that night visits are 30% more expensive, but this doesn't bother her at all. She asks him to save her baby and shows him a badly injured puppy that has wings. Ojin looks closely at the puppy, trying to figure out who or what he attacked. Selena notes that these wounds cannot be stopped with simple means and recommends using mandrake leaves. Ojin takes the leaves to complete the task, but as soon as Selena gets closer, the mandrake begins to rebel. Selena soberly assesses her chances and says that it would be better if Ojin himself asks the plant for help. Ojin carefully approaches the mandrake and says that it would be great if she gave him the leaf. Without asking any unnecessary questions, the mandrake is ready to give out one leaf. All this is accompanied by strange sounds that cause Ojin to become confused about the plant's intentions. He admits to himself that he would prefer never to hear this sound if he could live his life over again. Pulling himself together, he continues treating the puppy and notices that the bleeding quickly stops. The owner cries, saying that she will never forget this, and Ojin promises that they will continue the treatment. After the mistress leaves, Ojin is glad that he can finally close his eyes and get some sleep. However, the sleep lasts no more than 30 minutes, because soon a man breaks into the clinic again and asks if he is asleep. The owner brings another puppy with the same wounds on its body. Ojin says that judging by the tracks, he was attacked by the same animal that attacked the previous puppy. After carefully analyzing the wounds, they come to the conclusion that such damage could not have been caused by any weapon. Ojin comes to the conclusion that some kind of animal, supposedly a psychopath, is playing with them, maiming other animals. Selena says she's never heard of an animal called a psychopath, and Ojin realizes that term hasn't been coined here yet. The daughter of the owner who brought the fawn says that she knows very well who did it. The girl explains that Baron Doyle's pet, who is a wolf, is to blame for everything. She says that the Baron releases his wolf into the forest in order to get rid of helpless animals. Ojin wonders if there are no laws protecting animals in this world, and wonders how anyone can do such a thing. It is hinted to him that aristocrats can do whatever they want, and Ojin curses feudal society for its injustice. After a week, the number of night visits from clients does not stop, but on the contrary, only increases. Ojin is very sensitive to the needs of others, so he loudly declares that he can no longer live like this. He quickly organizes a massive resistance and heads to the estate gates, ordering the Baron to leave immediately. Protesters wave torches and say the Baron must wake up and ensure the safety of the animals. Ojin leads a crowd of protesters to finally get rid of his headache. The gates open and extra guards come out onto the street, looking at the crowd with stern glances. Suddenly they ask if Ojin Kim is present and where he is if he is not there. Ojin realizes that the guards already know who started this, and carefully introduces himself by name, saying that he is the one they are looking for. Suddenly the guards bow respectfully to him, emphasizing their peacefulness and calm attitude. They carefully inform him that they will take him to the castle, and he does not need to worry about anything. Entering inside, he discovers Baron Doyle's wolf, Magma, who has also been attacked by an unknown beast. Doyle begs him to save his baby, adding that he will give him absolutely everything he wants if he succeeds. Ojin and Selena look at the wounded animal in surprise, trying to understand what all this means and who they need to catch now. Rumors are spreading throughout the city that a magical creature has appeared in the western forest and is attacking everyone. People claim that this is an unusual magical creature, and most likely some kind of huge monster capable of eating people. They come to the conclusion that very soon this creature will taste human flesh and begin to attack travelers. One of the men climbed onto a makeshift platform and said that there was nothing to fear, since Doyle had already begun the capture operation. He adds that a huge trap has been set up in the forest, and soldiers are patrolling the area day and night, so it's only a matter of time. Ojin listens attentively to Doyle's stories and mentally notes that more than 90% of what he says is not true. He recalls that most of the time the Baron simply cried and was hysterical, and his subordinates came up with a plan for him. Ojin realizes that this is his first encounter with medieval media that can easily manipulate people. Selena suddenly appears next to him and notices that he looks quite worried, despite his plan. Ojin explains that most of the animals brought to the clinic were victims of attacks in the East Forest. However, the attack on the guardian dog took place in the Western Forest, which is very far from the village. He also emphasizes that right now the soldiers are searching the Western Forest, ignoring other possible habitats. Ojin notes that it's useful to comb the area, as there have been completely different attacks recently. But the situation seems strange. Selena says that this is suspicious, since usually the villagers don't go into the Western Forest at all. Ojin asks her why people don't go there, and she replies that it is believed to be haunted by many ghosts. Ojin wonders if this is really the case when they are suddenly interrupted by the owner of a shop that has just opened. He shows them the item they recently ordered and apologizes for opening so late. These products turn out to be a specialized reinforced glaze mixed with a special powder. Ojin says he couldn't dream of a more technologically advanced tool, while the blacksmith notes that it would be difficult to replicate. Ojin asks the blacksmith if he would change his mind if he were offered a reward worthy of such high-quality work. The blacksmith immediately shakes his hand and says that he will do everything in his power not to disappoint them. In this way, they create several essential tools that will help treat animals in the future. Selena looks at the drawing and says that he never thought about organizing space this way. Ojin is pleased that his architectural genius will now be recognized in the modern world. Suddenly, a large number of movers enter the clinic, and Selena announces that they have brought medicinal herbs. Selena shows him a special plant that, when mixed with water and made into a decoction, produces an effective sleeping pill. She is also shown several plants that can be used as a pain reliever or sedative. Ojin is surprised that in this world there are herbs that lower blood pressure and sugar, because in his world nothing like that exists. He bows at Selena's feet and asks her to teach him this incredible art of the modern world. Suddenly, a girl bursts into the clinic, telling him that he must follow her immediately. She happily announces that the wild monster has finally been caught and can now be dealt with. Ojin, along with Selena, sets off to follow her, and a few hours later, arrives at the location with the Baron and his men. Ojin hears inhuman sounds and assumes that there is something terrifying in this place. Apparently this creature is some kind of dragon, or even more cruel monster that will have to be dealt with. However, the hunters quickly realize that the creature has escaped the trap and is now somewhere nearby. By giving commands to their dogs, they communicate that the enemy must be cornered to cut off his escape route. The hunting dogs see a dark force located near the trees and immediately rush there. Ojin comes closer and wonders if this is the monster everyone was talking about. In front of him appears a completely ordinary cat with a tattoo on its forehead, completely covered in thorns. The cat continues to hiss and bare his teeth, trying to drive away the approaching people, while they freeze. One of the knights notes that this beast looks like an ordinary stray cat and does not pose a danger. Doyle, in turn, claims that it is definitely a monster, as can be judged by the reaction of his dog. Wolf Magma does act a bit subdued when around this creature. Doyle recommends that everyone pay attention to the fangs and claws, adding that this is a truly vicious creature. Ojin realizes that the cat is clearly getting more attention here than he deserves. Meanwhile, the knights decide to take action and immediately throw out a special net to prevent the animal from escaping. One of the hunters prepares to use heavy-duty chains to transport the animal. The unfortunate animal continues to dangle in the nets, but is unable to move or escape. Ojin watches in horror as the people decide to set the monster on fire. Doyle states that they will first take him alive for a public execution. Ojin wonders if these people are seriously going to destroy the poor cat for fun. For a moment, he remembers how a married couple came to him, fed the cat, and then found him beaten. Ojin quickly realizes that this is the work of people who enjoy torturing animals. Some of the people he hates most are animal abusers, which immediately makes him furious. Meanwhile, he notices that the animal is trying to break the nets, and people are trying to catch it. Ojin tries to stop them immediately, telling them to cover their ears and mouths before it's too late. Everyone looks at him in surprise, trying to understand why Ojin was so rebellious. He points to the creature's forehead and explains that it is the mark of the devil. So now the situation is getting serious. Doyle looks at him in surprise and asks if this mark really belongs to the devil. Ojin states that this is a clear sign of the underworld, and the presence of the mark supports this theory. He explains that it has to do with demons who will bring a deadly virus into the world that will destroy millions. Ojin uses special theatrical intonations to scare those present as much as possible. Doyle and his minions watch this in amazement and try to figure out who these strange demons are that they have never heard of. Ojin explains that information was originally transmitted through mice, and now through cats. He adds that cats have become even more dangerous carriers of disease and have come to Earth to destroy everyone. He emphasizes that if the disease spreads, half the population will simply disappear from the face of the Earth. The knights are skeptical of these stories and claim that they are not so stupid as to believe such nonsense. Doyle stops them with his appearance, showing that the stories have made a serious impression on him. He looks sternly at Ojin and asks if what he said is really true. Ojin confirms that this is exactly how things happened in his world, so he has no reason to lie for his own gain. He tells a heartbreaking and tragic story about how the entire world fought against the virus, and victory came at a high price. Doyle looks at the cat and asks if he is truly a demon minion, to which Ojin confirms. He also says that the cat is still small, so he can be pacified, as happened in his world. Ojin immediately turns to his partner and asks if she agrees with his optimistic forecast. He winks frantically, hoping she will understand and help him make his story more convincing. Selena agrees and claims that it is possible, adding that a cure can be created using the cat's blood and herbs. Ojin wonders if the story is convincing, as he may have embellished some details. One of the knights declares that this is complete nonsense, and Ojin silently hopes that his tongue will fall off. Doyle informs them that he is giving them a week to heal the creature and bring it to the castle. Ojin returns home and notes that the situation was very close to failure, but they were able to deceive their opponents. Looking at his interlocutor, he notes that she lies better than he expected, to which she explains that she did not lie. Ojin looks at her in surprise, and the girl explains that they can actually make a medicine using mandrake. Selena informs them that one mandrake will not be enough. They need about 100 of these plants, which will lead to their death. After that, she asks him why he wants to save this dangerous animal, because it is clearly not worth it. Selena clarifies that the cat is sleeping now, but when he wakes up, they will hardly be able to cope with him. Ojin notes that it is unlikely that the creature attacked the village animals, as that does not seem to be its style. He adds that he kept records of these injuries, and that animals in the area had wounds similar in shape and size. He then goes on to point out that Doyle's wolf injuries were significantly different from previous wounds he had examined. In his opinion, the size and shape of the claws indicate that the blow was inflicted by another animal. Ojin emphasizes that magma has been attacking here all this time, but there is something else strange. He adds that Doyle had previously used his authority to cover up the wolf attack, but suddenly declared a hunt for the cat. Ojin suggests that the sudden hunt is meant to hide something, and that the cat is the true target. Selena explains that this explains why Doyle tries to catch the cat but doesn't kill it, and that's why he believed the lie. Ojin notes that the scar on the cat's forehead does not look like a normal wound, which is worrying. He understands that he has to get to the bottom of the truth and find out what this little boy went through. Selena is surprised by such dedication, since she previously perceived him only as an ordinary veterinarian. However, she now realizes that this man is incredibly sweet and loves the animals he cares for very much. Meanwhile, Ojin is delighted by how warm and soft the cat is, realizing that he hasn't seen such an animal in a long time. Selena quickly changes her mind, realizing that the man is simply crazy and doing nonsense. The next day turns out to be difficult, as very loud cries of an unknown animal are heard in the clinic. Nearby visitors wonder what the sound is, noting that they have never heard anything like it. One of them claims that Ojin is currently fighting the demon and banishing the spread of the infection. People are starting to think that he is truly an extraordinary veterinarian and a real wizard from another world. They joyfully wish him long life, showing how opinion is formed in medieval society. Meanwhile, Ojin tries unsuccessfully to offer the cat some food. I noticed that the cat had serious scars from a powerful blow to the face with claws. Ojin understands that the animal has a character, and he needs to be flexible to cope with it. Selena examines the cat carefully and notices that he looks much smaller than he did 3 days ago. Ojin confirms her observation, explaining that the cat not only weighed less, but also shrank in size. He assumes the cat has mana, but it doesn't matter since he hasn't eaten for 3 days. The whole point is that the animal gets angry because of hunger and spends even more energy, becoming even hungrier. Ojin muses that he needs a chuchuru demon bar, which is the perfect treat for cats. However, after a few moments, his chest begins to tighten with pain, and he tries to understand what happened. A few moments later, something jumps out of the cat and begins to pulsate and emit energy. Ojin suddenly sees something appear that resembles the very same candy bar he was talking about. A few moments later, the candy bar is heading towards the angry cat at full speed. The bar shot proves to be incredibly accurate, landing directly in the creature's mouth. The cat instantly becomes much more talkative, as he finally received a tasty treat. Ojin immediately picks up the cat and begins feeding him, delighted at how obedient he has become. Selena watches this with a very interested look, realizing that this looks funny. Ojin couldn't be happier that the animal had stopped acting up and scratching him. After the cat began to devour the treat, a strange symbol, glowing blue, appeared on it again. Selena looks closely at the tattoo and realizes that it cannot mean anything else. After a few moments, she finally builds a complete picture of what happened, and understands that there can be no doubt. She realizes that in fact this is not a cat at all, but a completely different creature. She recalls the legend of the horned lion named Monoceros, which is known to absolutely every inhabitant of this world. Legend has it that this creature appeared when the dragons disappeared, and the world was filled with a huge amount of mana. These animals were called magical creatures, and among them was a sacred creature capable of performing miracles. Thus, the dry lands began to fill with water, and the dark lands became light thanks to the presence of these creatures. Monoceros was a being with a remarkable heart, and beings like him acted in the same way. They had the ability to regenerate, and moreover, it was said that their power was deadly. When the mana famine set in, many of these animals became exhausted and began to take the form of smaller creatures. However, they did not lose their pride, and therefore no one could ever tame them except one man. That man was the spirit of healing, which is now Ojin, who continues to train his legendary beast. For a successful trip to the litter box, Ojin offers another treat to the legendary mystical beast named Sunja. Ojin continues to spoil his comrade, handing him another treat so that he will not deny himself anything. Selena begins to watch this with some skepticism, wondering if what is happening is normal. After a while, we are transported to Doyle's estate, who menacingly asks his servants what all this means. He wonders if this creature is actually eating from the hands of some pathetic veterinarian. The spy informs him that it is true, and he personally saw Ojin holding the beast in his arms like a child. Doyle points out that this simply cannot be true, but his comrade explains that the soldiers do not like this situation. He recalls the theories they had previously discussed, and again wonders if the cat really is unusual. Doyle states that humans definitely cannot tame Monoceros, and how weakened these animals are does not matter. From his point of view, the energy contained in their bodies could turn into poison and tear them apart, because their power is enormous. Doyle recalls Ojin's words that similar events had happened in the world before, and people had been struggling with them for years. Doyle reflects on what he heard, that Monoceros have never eaten from a human's hand. Doyle knows of a method of taming such animals that is still unknown, and it has been tormenting his mind all night. The next morning we return to Ojin's clinic, where some organizational changes have taken place. He now employs a little girl who acts as a secretary and deals with paperwork. Ojin is happy that his place is gradually being transformed, and is starting to look like a real, expensive clinic. He recalls that it was difficult for him in the past because Selena was unsociable, which scared off some clients. Selena could even use violence if someone tried to cut in line, which was also not a good practice. Besides everything else, she could leave in the middle of the working day and return only in the evening. Ojin receives a message from her sometime later that she will be gone for a few days. He perceives this as a stab in the back, since he was left without help at the most crucial moment. Ojin urgently turns to another girl for help, offering her a few silver coins if she agrees to work for him. Unlike Selena, this girl shows amazing customer focus, which should have a positive impact on the business. He also notes that the girl loves animals very much and is unlikely to treat them badly. He also appreciates her diligence in her work and her incredible initiative in trying to help him. Ojin feels great and is thinking about hiring her full-time. However, after some time, a strange thought comes to him, which he had not thought about before. Suddenly he comes to the conclusion that it is too quiet here, and all the clients with pets are silent. Ojin recalls that it is usually noisy here, and the animals constantly react to each other, as if trying to figure something out. Today, all the animals suddenly became quiet, as if some creature was suppressing them with its presence. Ojin doesn't understand anything, although in fact the answer lies on his shoulder, and the beast looks menacingly at everyone in a row. After some time, it is time for the next visitor to conduct a comprehensive inspection. This time, Pinpin's owner comes to them again, and the baby waves to her even more forcefully. Ojin wonders what happened, because last time the hamster weighed just over 500 grams, and now it weighs 10 kilograms. He wonders if a hamster can be that big and suggests it might be a panda. The pet's owner explains in surprise that it is not a hamster, but a flopper. He asks Ojin if he knows what a flopper is, and Ojin realizes that there is different terminology for animals in this world. The assistant, standing up for her boss, explains that the doctor is from another world, so he uses different terms. She adds that this is why he can make diagnoses that other doctors here cannot make due to their limited knowledge. Ojin notes that this is enough to hire her full-time, as she deserves the best. After this, he asks why the pet has grown so much, emphasizing that its condition seems to be fine. Ojin notices that the hamster's fur color is unique, but anatomically it is definitely a normal hamster. Sunja looks at the hamster with utmost disdain and prepares for a sharp attack. A few moments pass before she suddenly rushes forward, not paying attention to the people around her. Ojin tries to stop her, but it is too late, and the cat delivers a powerful blow with her paw right to the hamster's face. There is a loud bang and Pin shatters into several copies of himself, terrifying everyone. Ojin wonders in amazement how a simple hamster could split itself into several parts. He understands that he has entered a truly crazy world, where even the basic laws of physics are not observed. He immediately wonders how to explain what happened to the pet's owner, who, apparently, is also confused. However, it soon becomes clear that the owner is very happy about what happened, explaining that he dreamed of having more pets. He hugs all the hamster copies tightly, trying to figure out what to name them and what to do with them, since they are already starting to breathe. After some time, the animals escape from their captivity and again begin to divide into several parts. However, a figure suddenly appears and deftly catches them with sharp and swift movements. Selena explains that it is not a flopper, and everyone looks at her in surprise, as they did not expect her sudden appearance. Selena looks closely at the animals and says that they are blobs, after which she asks where the owner got them from. Pinpin's owner explains that he doesn't know this himself, since the animal was given to him by his father some time ago. Selena states that this needs to be dealt with and puts them in a special cage, adding that they need to be left at the hospital. She immediately tries to calm the clients, explaining that they are not going to exorcise the demons from these creatures. Ojin also tries to reassure clients that they do not resort to unethical medical practices because they love animals very much. Once all the customers leave, Selena decides to tell him the secret that blobs are not actually natural creatures. She emphasizes that this creature is the result of experiments by a mad magician. Ojin realizes that this world is truly insane, because even scientists here act like complete idiots. Selena says that the magician is not actually such a bad person, even though he has many shortcomings. She returns one of the Pinpin copies to the enclosure, explaining that she thought the breed was extinct and did not expect to meet them here. She guesses that at least hundreds of years have passed, and Ojin asks what her real age is. After this, he notices a sudden change in Sunji's behavior and asks what happened. A few moments later, there is a knock on the door, and Doyle's irritated voice orders it to be opened immediately. Doyle does not come alone, but in the company of two strong men, destined for unknown purposes. From the very beginning, Doyle demands to see the monster immediately, so that a decision can be made on further actions. Ojin remembers trying to figure out what to do, but was too busy trying to feed the creature. He also notices that Selena has disappeared somewhere, leaving him at the most crucial moment when help was needed. Ojin tries to appease Doyle with various offers, but he declares that he only wants the monster and nothing more. The townspeople Doyle brought immediately begin to verbally attack Ojin, saying that if he was a good doctor, he should have cured the monster by now. Ojin reports that there is a small problem, and the customers are surprised to ask what it is. He explains that when he was exorcising the evil spirit, a mysterious trace somehow formed between him and the cat. Ojin explains that, to paraphrase into human language, the cat and the spirit are now linked and cannot separate. The clients immediately declare that he is talking nonsense and try to accuse him of cheating, but Ojin decides to take action. He turns sharply to the Baron, asking why he keeps exactly the same cat locked up. Doyle is very surprised and tries to understand how Ojin knows such important things. Ojin says he wouldn't want to know that Doyle plans to smuggle the cat out and execute an innocent man. He continues to press Doyle, explaining that it was not the cat that was harming the animals from the beginning, but his wolf. Doyle asks what these speculations are, and tries to see at least some evidence for such a daring theory. Ojin immediately shows him the medical reports, which make it clear that it was Doyle's wolf that inflicted the wounds on the animals. However, the villain immediately snatches the evidence from him and tears it into small pieces. Ojin is indignant and realizes that he should have made a copy of the documents since they still haven't switched to digital documentation. After this, he pushes them aside and heads towards the cat, announcing that it is time to end these games. Naturally, the first thing the cat does is strike the villain with a powerful blow of its claws, leaving strong and deep wounds. Ojin wonders what he should do, and comes to the conclusion that he needs to summon a gun and deal with the situation. He understands that he has to do this because the life of a poor and precious animal is at stake. Suddenly the door opens and a tall elf with a staff enters the room, along with Selena and several other assistants. Doyle looks at them with horror, making it clear with his whole appearance that he did not expect such high-ranking officials to appear. Seeing the elf's characteristic items, Doyle realizes that the person standing before him is the head of the Supreme Inspection Agency, Kalian. Doyle bows solemnly before him and tells him that it is a great honor for him to welcome him to this place. Kalian states that they came because they received a report of a threatened divine beast being discovered. Ojin looks closely at the elf, noting that he looks just like in the movies. He also suggests that his partner left for a few days specifically to contact these people. After some time, he comes to the simple conclusion that Selena herself is an elf, given the shape of her ears. Meanwhile, Kalyan tries to interact with Sunja using his elven spells in a strange language. Sunja gradually succumbs to magical influence, as these creatures also have an innate connection with mana. The magical cat falls into a trance and slowly flies into the air, after which the lid of the cage opens so as not to interfere with its flight. Kalian carefully analyzes the magical creature and confirms that it belongs to the Monoceros genus, as Selena said. They discover that the animal's head has a crown-shaped wound, reminiscent of a cross-section of a branch of the world tree. Kalian comes to the disappointing conclusion that this mark is a special message extracted along with the mana. He menacingly reports that someone has forcibly extracted the mana from this sacred creature, despite the fact that there is incredibly little of it left. Kalian immediately turns to Baron Doyle and menacingly asks if he is really responsible for this crime. Doyle begins to cry and declares that this is slander and that he would never attempt on the life of such a creature. Kalian remains angry and asks who then was so ignorant as to attempt on the cat's life. Doyle says that he really doesn't know, and then runs away with his henchmen, their heels flashing. Ojin is pleased that in this world, animal rights groups are stronger than any aristocrats, and immediately expresses his respect for Kalian. Kalian notes that there are not many means in this world that can harm a divine beast, and that the incident needs to be investigated. He also turns to Ojin, thanking him for being able to protect the beautiful divine beast. After this, Kalian says that they will take the child and look after him to ensure his safety. Ojin is upset that the beast is going to be taken away, but understands that it will be much better for Sunji's safety. After some time, he notices that the cat continues to break the barrier with its power for unknown reasons. They try to calm him down by explaining that they are not his enemies, but it does not lead to anything. Once freed, Sunja immediately jumps into Ojin's arms, showing her boundless devotion. Once in his arms, she begins to purr and rejoice at the opportunity to get closer to him. Kalian and the other elves watch in amazement, wondering how this is possible, as Monoceros are considered untrainable. However, after a while, they notice a shining necklace around Ojin's neck. Kalian looks at him carefully and realizes that the legendary figure stands before him. He states that it appears that the legend was not a lie, and in that case, this is the most likely development of events. Ojin notices their strange looks and wonders what could be the reason for such an attitude. He briefly returns to his past life and remembers that the professor had the same look in his eyes when he tried to lure him into graduate school. Selena also looks at him strangely and wonders if they are all thinking the same thing, receiving confirmation. Kalian decides not to provide further clarity and states that he entrusts the child to him with complete confidence in his safety. Ojin asks if Kalian is sure about this, to which he is told that it will be best for both of them. Kalian adds that since Selena will be staying with Ojin, he can safely entrust the beast. Selena says she will help him, but there is no hint of enthusiasm in her voice. Kalian bows his head nobly, after which he decides to cast another spell in the Elven language. He points his staff towards Sunji and continues to cast an unknown spell that affects the protagonist. At the end of the spell, a small medallion, imbued with the protective magic of their order, appears on the cat's chest. Kalian claims that this medallion will help restore the power of the lost horn, and Ojin is very happy about this. Another elf reports that if the animal is in danger, they will immediately receive a signal and come to the rescue. Kalian emphasizes that as a token of gratitude for everything they have done, they want to give Ojin a special ring. Ojin asks what the ring is, and Kalian explains that it is imbued with the power of their heavenly family. Ojin realizes that this sounds ominous, and remembers a movie that also began with a gold ring. Kalian reports that the ring contains protective magic and will give an additional signal in case of danger. Kalian steps forward and asks permission to place the ring on Ojin's hand, putting him in a somewhat awkward position. After a while, it turns out that the ring fits perfectly, but Ojin is not very happy about it. Ojin was always alone since birth, and no one gave him gifts except his parents on his birthday. This is the first ring in his life, and he feels some kind of dark magic in it. Suddenly, he decides to give up the ring, explaining that he works with his hands, and accessories will get in the way. Kalian advises him to think of the ring as a protective device to make it morally easier to agree. Ojin explains that he is a doctor and is uncomfortable with having something in his hands, but Kalian says he knows the solution. After this, Kalian uses another spell, pointing the staff towards Ojin and the ring. After a few moments, the ring turns into a small tattoo that looks very beautiful. Ojin thinks it's pure madness, but he likes the look of the tattoo much more than the accessories. Kalian explains that to use it, you need to place the calcine emblem over your heart and cast the spell. After this, he completes the calibration between the staff and the tattoo to complete the preparation. Smiling, he adds that he can now communicate remotely with those who have a telestron. Ojin also gains the ability to create a compact light source that emanates solely from his finger. He happily shows it off from all sides, noting that it is a very useful gift, and that it has other functions. Kalian emphasizes that the most important function is protection, and Ojin expresses his deep gratitude for the gift. Kalian says he has one more question he would like to ask right now, so as not to waste time. Ojin says that Kalian can ask anything, and Kalian happily takes a step forward. He suddenly asks how Ojin got the necklace, and Ojin replies that he got it from a dragon. Kalian asks in surprise about the dragon, and, having received an affirmative answer, states that dragons became extinct thousands of years ago. Ojin is a little taken aback, as he didn't expect the dragons to be gone for a long time. Kalian asks if this means Ojin has been around for 1,000 years, and Ojin tries to figure out how to explain it. He says that the dragon's bat was sick, so he called a healer, and that healer turned out to be himself. Ojin adds that he was given a necklace as payment for his treatment, and was mistakenly transported to this world. Suddenly he notices that the elves' reaction to his story is very strange and unexpected. A few moments later, they fall to their knees before him and report that they have just seen the spirit of healing in person. Ojin becomes nervous and asks why they decided that his name is the healing spirit. However, after some time, he remembers that the dragon also behaved strangely and called him the spirit of healing. Ojin realizes that his interlocutors have made a mistake again and tries to figure out what to do in this situation. He tries to reason with them, explaining that it is a small confusion and that he is an ordinary man, not a magical spirit. He emphasizes that he ended up here by accident, due to the dragon's mistake, by his own will, and not thanks to his abilities. Kalian claims to have received a necklace imbued with the power of a dragon, completely ignoring Ojin's attempts to reason with him. At a certain point, Kalian suddenly grabs Ojin's hand and tells him that the world is facing a serious crisis. He suddenly asks if Ojin has ever heard of mana, and everything related to this magical phenomenon. Ojin replies negatively, and Kalian explains that mana is present in all beings in the world. Kalian adds that the more mana accumulates within a creature, the stronger and more sacred it is. Kalian sadly notes that after the extinction of the dragons, countless divine beasts began to disappear. He also says that eventually even the world tree begins to wither, which is a very bad sign. Kalian emphasizes that such a rate of mana consumption will soon completely deplete it, and the survival of the next generation will be at risk. He explains that world leaders, sensing a crisis, created an organization to develop measures to prevent disaster. This is how an order is formed, which includes these elves, who are looking for possible ways to prevent the catastrophe. Kalian explains that there is a legend, passed down since ancient times, about a healing spirit who will carry the power of a dragon on his neck. Ojin looks at his interlocutor in surprise, and asks if they believe that he can somehow save the world. Kalian says with incredible enthusiasm that they have been waiting for his appearance all this time, and now they have finally waited for him. After bowing to him, they announce that they will dedicate their lives today to protecting the spirit of healing. Ojin realizes that his hope for a quiet life and the ability to pay his debts is now completely destroyed by this conversation. He remembers the dragon with an unkind word and curses him for having played such a dirty trick on him. However, the day goes on, and he decides to see the next patient, who came with a very problematic animal. This animal turns out to be a fish named Lumi, which, strangely enough, shows absolutely no signs of disease. The owner asks why the fish can't fly, and Ojin reminds her that it's been around for many years, so that could be the reason. The hostess becomes more melancholic and sad, saying that she did not expect the answer to be so simple. She asks if there is a way to slow down aging or at least restore the ability to fly. Ojin says aging in pets is a natural part of life that needs to be accepted and lived with. The girl sadly explains that her father has been bedridden due to illness since last year. She says that he loved flying fish very much, so he raised several at once, but since his illness they have become weaker. She realizes there is clearly a problem here, as the fish, one after another, have stopped flying regardless of age. Looking at the fish in her hands, the girl says that this fish is the only one that can still fly. She adds that Lumi is especially dear to her father because he always took her with him wherever he went. She happily notes that she heard her father give her this fish when he proposed to her mother. Selena confirms that this is true, as proposing with a flying fish was a fashion trend back then. The girl enthusiastically says that several decades ago, the bodies of flying fish met the light. She adds that the schools of flying fish soaring in the night sky looked like a meteor shower. This is why they were incredibly popular at major events and festivals, as they were fun to watch. Ojin is skeptical about using animals for personal gain, but says nothing. The girl says that her parents lived a happy life, full of various trials that they overcame. However, a few years ago, her mother died of illness, and immediately after that, her father began to lose strength. The girl sadly explains that now he simply locks himself in his room, spending the whole day with the flying fish. She adds that her father said that if all the fish lost their ability to fly, he would commit suicide. Selena indifferently asks why they don't just buy him a new school of healthy flying fish. The girl says that this is impossible, after which she accidentally turns to Ojin, hoping that he can help. She asks him to save her father from despair, but Ojin understands that there is absolutely nothing that can be done here. Ojin understands that a spiritual connection with a pet does affect health, but there is one caveat. He recalls several patients who were so attached to their animals that their illnesses greatly affected them. Some of these patients were unable to cope in ordinary situations without their friend. The girl continues to demand that he promise to heal her, and Ojin turns to her to calm her down. Suddenly, Kalian appears before him with a whole squad of elves, who joyfully come to him and tell him that the spirit of healing is in front of him. Ojin jumps out of his bed and realizes that most of this conversation was just a dream. He looks around tensely and finds only Sunja sleeping peacefully on his lap. The next morning, he greets his colleague, and she immediately notices that he has a sleepy face. The girl sadly notes that she also slept poorly yesterday, which is why she feels unwell. She asks if it's because he's worried about the flying fish, and Ojin replies that it's not that at all. The girl says that she is incredibly sorry, since the fish's problem is a lack of mana. Ojin looks at her in surprise, and she explains that when she was little, adults often told her about this. She claims that the flying fish stopped glowing because there was much less mana in the atmosphere. She adds that adults also said that if this continues, the fish will soon lose the ability to fly completely. Ojin realizes that this is very similar to the process of environmental pollution and the destruction of the ecosystem. This again reminds him of yesterday's dream, when he was called the Spirit of Healing and recognized for his eternal devotion. Selina appears as suddenly as usual and says that it is not just about the flying fish, but that the problem is much more global. She states that in reality, the number of global animals is constantly increasing, and in most cases the cause cannot be determined. From her point of view, the most obvious proof that mana depletion is to blame for everything is the situation with Sunja. Ojin looks at her closely and realizes that she was also a lion during her original transformation. He comes to the conclusion that she is cute in her cat form too, and he would be interested to see her true form. He wonders if she will wash herself in such a funny way when she becomes a big lion again. This thought suddenly leads him to a possible solution to the problem he has been struggling with all these days. He asks what illness the flying fish owner's father has, and the assistant replies that it is a disease that makes bones brittle. After this, he turns to Selina and asks what medications are usually prescribed for such diseases. Selina states that it is safe to say that it is bloodroot, which gives the bones a red tint, and other herbs. Ojin asks about the side effects of these herbs, and Selina explains that bloodroot affects the nerves, causing the body to lose strength. Ojin asks if there are any medications that can counteract the side effects. Selina says that in this case, the main effect of the treatment will completely disappear. Ojin states that it doesn't matter at all and asks how to prepare the medicine, causing her to smile slightly. Selina says the recipe is right behind her, and Ojin, surprised, steps back to look. Of course, there is a mandrake there, which has been sitting in a pot with a bored look all this time. Ojin turns to the mandrake and tells her that she needs 2 leaves to make medicine. However, despite his polite request, the mandrake begins to put on airs and shakes his head. Ojin continues to insist, and says that he asked her calmly, so there is no reason for any misunderstanding. Suddenly, the mandrake screams indignantly and decides to use the power of its incredible voice. Ojin and his assistant also cover their ears to at least somehow protect their eardrums. They ask her what she is doing and demand that she slowly explain why she is behaving so badly. Ojin continues to swear, saying that his eardrums almost burst, but the assistant advises him to be more gentle. She assumes that the mandrake is offended, that she is only approached when something is needed, and the rest of the time only Sunja is pampered. Ojin muses that he has never grown a plant with his own consciousness before, so it will be difficult. The assistant recommends at least giving the mandrake a name to emphasize its uniqueness. Ojin wonders what name the mandrake will need, and immediately after that, the plant begins to cry. Ojin realizes that now he will have to babysit another creature that gets on his nerves. After some thought, he names the mandrake Mandy Kim to emphasize its connection to his family. The assistant praises Mandy and says that she congratulates her on such a joyful holiday and a good date. Ojin also addresses her by name and says that he only needs 2 leaves. Mandy does as he asks, making a distinctive noise, and Ojin mentally notes that it's still just as disgusting as the first time. Selina watches closely as her assistant says that Ojin is popular with animals and plants. She quickly approaches him and asks if he could borrow his necklace for a minute to check something. Looking at the necklace, she comes to the conclusion that it looks completely ordinary and does not represent anything special. The girl places her hands on Sunja and Mandy to test their reaction to the touch. Both living creatures begin to show signs of hostility and hiss at her. Selina muses that having dragon powers alone doesn't endear them much to her. Afterwards, she asks Ojin how the necklace's power is activated. Ojin says that he simply concentrates on what he wants, and the necklace's power somehow manifests itself. He also adds that his chest is getting a little tight, which turns out to be a good clue for Selina. Ojin only has to touch the necklace, and the animals immediately come to life, as if they were looking for a very rare delicacy. Afterwards, he summons another cat treat and spoils Sunja while Selina solves the mystery. She speculates that through the necklace's power and her own qualities, Ojin projects the precious mana that everyone wants to obtain. Meanwhile, Ojin's assistant says that she has processed Mandy's leaves to make a decoction. Ojin looks closely at the ampule and realizes that the solution inside has the right consistency. The assistant asks if a bag is needed for the on-site examination, and Ojin recommends a large bag. Selina continues to watch him closely and wonders if this man really is a healing spirit. At this time, we are transported to the very estate where the aristocrat is confined to his bed. His daughter says it's time to take his medicine and brings a tray with a teapot and pills. However, after a few minutes, she takes a closer look and discovers that her father has fallen out of bed and is in a sad state. She runs up to him and asks if he is okay, to which he replies that he is perfectly fine. She asks why he got out of bed alone, and someone explains that he thought Lumi wanted to look outside. His daughter tells him that he must be careful, because any careless movement will disrupt the healing process. The father explains resignedly that he doesn't have much time left anyway, so there's no need to worry about it. She asks him why he keeps saying that, since his illness can be cured. but he states that it is not about the illness. He explains that people die not only from diseases, because when all hope disappears, a person truly dies. His daughter starts crying and asks him not to talk about it for a while. Ojin bursts into the room and explains that this is not true, because people are dying from misinformation about the disease and improper treatment. He also says unhealthy habits and poor patient care lead to premature death. When asked who he is, Ojin quickly replies that his name is Ojin Kim, and he has found out that Lumi cannot fly because of old age. He adds that the side effects of the medications her owner is taking are to blame. The father asks in surprise what he means, since it is not the fish that takes the medicine, but only he. Ojin explains that flying fish live on land, but they have retained habits from the times when they lived in the water. One of the main habits is to take care of food or someone they like for a long time. He explains that Lumi can't fly because she licked too many medicinal ingredients from her owner's hair and beard. This information greatly surprises the fish owner, and he says that this is simply impossible. He swears he has never seen fish lick his hair. However, his daughter asks him if he didn't know this was happening. She says that every day when he falls asleep, the fish licks his hair and beard all night long. The aristocrat understands why his beard always shone, as if it had been groomed by a professional. Ojin confirms that this is indeed the case, and states that he has brought a medicine that will quickly cure the fish's ailment. He adds that from now on, when the client goes to bed, he will have to wear a nightcap. Immediately after this, they decide to carry out the procedure on all the fish at once, so as not to delay. After the procedure is completed, Ojin explains that the medicine is very fast-acting, so the fish will recover soon. His words are confirmed. Lumi gradually rises into the air and begins to flap her fins. The owner asks in surprise if the fish really recovered so quickly. He rejoices and says that he simply does not believe that this is not a dream, and that the fish is in good health. Ojin explains that this baby was the healthiest, so the effect appeared faster. He also says that the rest of the fish will soon be back to normal, and everyone present thanks him for his help. Suddenly, one of the fish hits his hand and starts biting hard, catching him off guard. Ojin wonders what's happening to them when suddenly the next fish hits the back of his head and bites his skin. This happens to all the fish, as if they had momentarily turned into real piranhas. However, they detach quite quickly and continue to float slowly in the air. The aristocrat looks at the fish, and his eyes grow even wider in surprise and shock. The thing is that these fish probably sucked mana from the main character's body to gain the ability to glow. Everyone in the room is surprised that the fish have suddenly decided to regain such strength. The aristocrat is so impressed that for a moment he is transported back to the days of his wild youth. Then a huge number of flying fish shone in the sky, which resembled small comets. His wife thanks him, saying that she has never seen anything more beautiful and is very impressed. The aristocrat asks if she is ready to marry him, and the wife agrees, starting a beautiful story. The memories gradually fade, and the aristocrat is left with a flying fish in his hands, which continues to glow. Ojin says that it is indeed a very stunning and beautiful sight that impresses him. His assistant says she now understands why flying fish are used for marriage proposals. Selena analyzes the situation and notices that, thanks to Ojin's blood and hair, the fish began to glow and fly. She guesses that this man is really not as simple as she expected. She is tormented by the question of whether this man is the very spirit that the world is waiting for. Selena returns to Kalyan after a while to ask if he is sure that Ojin is the spirit of healing. Kalyan confidently explains that everything matches the prophecy, but Selena remains skeptical. He reminds her that he gave her a ring that doesn't even belong to him, to which Selena replies that the owner of the ring would definitely allow it. He also says that this man was chosen by the Monoceros, and there is no more convincing proof in the world. He emphasizes that not everyone noticed this, hinting at Doyle and his pathetic henchmen. He, full of confidence, says that the rumor of the manifestation of the spirit of healing will soon spread throughout the world. Selena asks if Kalyan is planning to use Ojin Kim as bait. After thinking for a moment, she says that this is why he allowed the Baron to escape instead of finishing him off on the spot. Kalyan explains that catching one or two villains is not a difficult task, but one must look at the larger goals. He states that the truth behind these people is needed, and we must wait for it to come to light. Kalyan tells her not to worry, adding that he won't put Ojin in danger. Kalyan also says that he knows that Selena was in the city for another reason, but it turned out to be a lucky coincidence. Selena explains that when she first saw him in the middle of the city, she noticed a giant rabbit. The elf emphasizes that she was interested in Ojin's necklace, and therefore she decided to observe them from a close distance. Selena states that this man is truly special, but she cannot see in him the healing spirit that everyone talks about. Kalyan smiles and explains that only time will tell if this man will truly save the world. Smiling, he adds that, as is well known, The prophecy about the spirit of healing concerns not only the salvation of this world. Calm reigns at Ojin Kim's veterinary clinic, but it is quickly interrupted by a loud scream. Ojin asks what the block is doing here and reminds him that it was supposed to be discharged last week. Selena calmly explains that she has decided to take in one of the three, then takes it in her hand and begins to spin it. Selena explains that blobs are divided into those with a core on top of their heads and those without. She adds that only the one with the core needs to be controlled, and then the others will not be able to split. Ojin looks closely at Ping Ping and realizes that apparently this one can split into several parts. Selena squeezes him and explains that this guy is very nervous, so you need to be especially careful with him. Ojin asks if Selena is going to leave him here, and when he says yes, he becomes worried. Selena clarifies that it cannot be returned, since these creatures need supervision, otherwise trouble will arise. She adds that there have been cases where, due to the owner's ignorance, blobs began to divide uncontrollably and destroyed cities. Ojin asks if she intends to keep this dangerous creature here, to which Selena calmly confirms. Ojin notes that it's like raising time bombs, as neighbors can be unfriendly. The helpers ask if the owner gave permission to shelter the blob, recalling how tenderly he treated him. Selena comes closer and explains that she needs permission to do this, after which she changes her mind. Selena clarifies that the owner did not give permission, but she enlisted his cooperation, and Ojin realizes that the creature was simply taken away. Ojin is about to continue the discussion, but suddenly his assistant tries to stop him to say something. She carefully explains that it is better not to interfere in arguments with her, since she has heard something important from her elders. She says with confidence that she has heard that elves who hide their deeds are best left alone for their own safety. Ojin asks what this belief is based on, and she replies that elves place marks on the ears of especially dangerous criminals. Selena reminds that this girl usually hits first, and then, if she really wants to, asks questions. She also notes that the girl does not talk about herself, which speaks of her dark past, which she does not want to talk about. Ojin wonders in his mind if she really is a criminal, and tries to figure out what's so serious about it. He hopes she didn't prosecute other people for killing them, because that would be very hard on him. Selena suddenly comes up and says it's time to open the clinic, causing him to jump in surprise. Ojin reflects that Selena is a good worker, but perfect people don't exist. As soon as he opens the door, he finds that a huge number of visitors have arrived. They all explain that they require their pets to be examined immediately because they have serious ailments. They are trying to line them up to form a normal queue as the crowd has gathered at the doors. Ojin realizes that the dismissal will have to be delayed a little, as he will need an extra pair of hands. Meanwhile, we are transported to Baron Doyle's castle, where something mysterious is happening. An unknown individual wonders why the Etherean Order suddenly decided to come to the clinic and ruin everything. Doyle says he doesn't know himself, because they suddenly appeared and started saying something about a sacred beast. An unknown person asks how he dared to run away and leave the beast to the Etherean Order. Doyle apologizes to his parents, saying that he will definitely return the beast, and asks how he plans to do it. Doyle explains that the creature is now in the possession of Ojin Kim, which leaves the dark figures in the castle confused. They claim that this is simply impossible, since such an animal is not capable of living next to a person, and this has been proven many times. Doyle confirms that he thought so himself, but for some reason the animal became very attached to the doctor. The aristocrat is silent for a long time, struck by the unusualness of the news, which he did not expect to hear. He sternly asks if there are any other people who know about the incident, and Doyle replies that only his servants and butlers. The mysterious figure asks if he silenced these people, and Doyle wonders what that means. They call him an idiot and order them to seize everyone who was with him that day, after which Doyle exhales tensely. He then turns to his servants and demands that Theodore and Alex be called immediately, to which he receives the answer that they are currently on vacation. The servant explains that because of the constant overtime, they complained so much that they were sent on leave. Doyle says that they need to cancel their vacation and bring them here, but they tell him that they have already left and do not know where. Meanwhile, rumors begin to spread in the taverns that members of the Etherean Order, which has legendary status, have appeared here. Ordinary people discuss the fact that the Order has appeared in their backwater and wonder why it is here. Many people are starting to spread rumors that a great order has visited the veterinary clinic. People assume that the doctor is an extraordinary person if such influential people are interested in him. Very soon, people begin to discuss the existence of the spirit of healing, and now it no longer seems that it exists only in legends. Some remain skeptical, believing that Ojin is simply a talented veterinarian who works well with animals. Gossip also begins in the kingdoms when they learn that the healing spirit is apparently a man. One of the girls says that there are rumors about the incredible beauty of the healing spirit, but if it is a man, then the situation changes. She is asked what exactly the situation changes, to which she replies that the prophecy says that the spirit of healing will save the world. She joyfully explains that if someone gains the spirit of healing, they can become the ruler of this world. Meanwhile, we are briefly transported to the elite residential areas of the nobility, where a large number of merchants and aristocrats live. We find ourselves in a special clinic where Dr. Adrian works, who wonders why it is so quiet here. He adds that it seems that only quiet animals have come today and are asking to let in the first patient. But he is told that there are no patients. He is surprised that it is almost noon, and assumes that they left because he was too late. They explain to him that there has been no one in the foyer since early morning, and he asks whether the petty count is still trying to slander him. He calls his political opponent a vile scoundrel, and says that he will have to face him in court. He is informed that the case is at another veterinary clinic in a poor area, and Adrian clarifies that this area is not very prestigious. He suggests that his aristocratic clients should avoid it, but the butlers say the clinic is popular. Adrian decides not to worry, and explains that he shouldn't expect any serious harm from the commoners' doctors, since he didn't graduate from the academy. He declares that he will consider this a vacation, and will rest for a couple of days, since tomorrow's visit to Lady Marian's unicorn's house will bring him profit. The butler reports that a messenger from Lady Marian has just arrived and cancelled the appointment. Adrian says that this is impossible and tries to understand what the reason could be. The butler reports that Lady Marian asked me to tell you that she will be going to Ojin Kim's veterinary clinic. Adrian loses his temper and demands that a carriage be brought to him immediately so that he can deal with the situation himself. As has already become clear, this man's name is Adrian, and he has a noble origin, as well as an outstanding appearance. He considers himself a rare talent who combines intelligence and culture. But the reason he became a veterinarian is very simple. The thing is that he is incredibly fond of the owner of the charming animals, and uses the profession as an excuse to get to know her. Adrian believes that there is nothing more beautiful and rewarding in this world than relieving women of worries and sorrows. However, one should not misunderstand him, as he strictly separates work and personal life, with a few exceptions. The only exception is Lady Marian Astrid, who has captured his heart from the moment she came to him. From that day on, his heart begins to beat only for her, and now he spares no effort to impress her. Adrian believes that he became a veterinarian to take care of her unicorn, and at least that's what he thinks. Adrian is angry and wonders if she really trusted her love to a commoner without family or tribe. He declares this outrageous, and closes the clinic to go to Marian's estate. At the estate, he is met by his strict but polite mother Marian, who says that she did not expect to see him here. She asks if he can explain why he was looking for her daughter without an appointment. Adrian explains that as the attending physician to a unicorn named Ruru, he couldn't help but be concerned, as she is a delicate creature. He adds that entrusting an animal to a man with unproven skills will lead to trouble. Marian's mother says in a calm voice that she's been reliably informed that Ojin Kim is the woman who runs her own clinics. Adrian looks at her in surprise and asks if this is really true, to which she confirms that her skills are quite good. She adds that she heard that this woman is so beautiful that she is called a fairy or a spirit. Adrian is impressed by this information and mentally wonders how beautiful she must be. He immediately imagines her as a beauty with golden hair or as a cold woman with a blue-black hairstyle. Suddenly, Marian's mother announces that she is prepared for his reaction and has seen everything she wanted. She immediately asks the servants to escort him out, and Adrian tries in vain to convince her that his intentions are pure. He claims that he has impure thoughts only in relation to Lady Marian, but this does not impress her mother. Adrian smiles happily and explains that he actually wants to marry Lady Marian, but her mother orders him to be taken out. Humiliated and insulted, Adrian menacingly heads to the area, hoping to meet Ojin. He reflects that his professional skills should be enough to win an intellectual duel. He understands that people think that unicorns are only obedient to chaste virgins, but this is not true. He knows that unicorns choose people by scent, relying on their sensitive sense of smell. They especially hate the smell of blood and male sweat, so if you approach them carelessly, trouble may arise. Many people have been injured or gored by antlers because they did not take proper precautions. Unicorns also love women who are always clean and wear good perfume, which attracts their attention. Adrian smiles and reflects that in this respect he and unicorns are very similar, since they cannot stand men. At first, he also went through a lot of trials and errors, but thanks to the secret, he achieved success. The secret is that a few days before the appointment he washes himself at least twice a day and thinks about the same things as his hostess. He happily reflects that if someone unverified approaches the unicorn, it will be his mistake. From his point of view, everything will happen in an instant, so he won't have to make any effort. He imagines that at that moment he will arrive in all his glory, fresh and fragrant, and win her heart back. In his fantasies, he says that he will protect her and the unicorns for the rest of his life, and together, they will go home. Having created such a story, he understands that he will now live happily ever after if he manages to arrive on time. After this, he begins to laugh loudly, feeling his incredible victory, which is filled with justice and honor. After some time, the driver announces that they have finally arrived in Belmore, and soon they find themselves at the clinic. Adrian steps out of the carriage and looks closely at the huge crowd that has gathered there, wondering what is going on. People explain that they are seeing a unicorn for the first time, adding that they had previously only read about such a creature in books. Adrian is glad that the performance has already begun, and believes that the doctor will soon disgrace himself in front of the crowd. He sees Ruru rearing up, excited that the unicorn is about to go on a rampage. But he doesn't notice one important detail. Adrian still consoles himself with the thought that soon everything will work out on its own, and he will not have to make any effort. However, it quickly turns out that Ojin was able to tame this formidable animal on the first try. Adrian can't believe his eyes and wonders if he's imagining it all and how it's even possible. Meanwhile, Ojin happily notes that the unicorn is indeed docile and behaves perfectly. Adrian realizes that this is a completely different horse, because Ruru gets angry even under anesthesia and cannot lie still. Marion happily remarks that this is the first time the unicorn has carried someone else, and Ojin asks her if this is really the case. Adrian assumes that this is some kind of trick that was set up, because it is impossible to explain it in any other way. Ojin turns to his colleague and asks her to come closer to pet the unicorn, since it is so docile. Adrian assumes that there is an elf next to Ruru who has cast a spell on him. However, after some time, the unicorn suddenly sinks its teeth into Selena's hand. Selena looks on rather phlegmatically at her grave injury, while Ojin is much more worried. Adrian understands that this is a normal reaction from Ruru, but it is unclear why he decided to let Ojin get close to him. Ojin says the horses need to be treated as soon as possible, and Selena notes that it was quite painful. Ojin advises everyone to disperse to avoid injury, after which they lead the horse into the building. Adrian is lamenting because he wanted to watch more to gain some information. Meanwhile, people are wondering why the horse is behaving so unpredictably. Adrian realizes he can't just leave and notices a tree he can climb to look out the window. He begins to climb upwards and demands that those watching not interfere, so as not to judge his incredible power. He is a two-time Royal Academy tree climbing champion and has no equal. Quite quickly he climbs to the required height and looks carefully out the window, where Ojin and Selena are visible. He also took with him a special pair of binoculars to better examine important details of the interaction. Adrian notices that Ojin is performing first aid correctly, but is using herbs that are unknown to him. He also notes the strange method of bandaging, suggesting that it is some kind of folk method due to inexperience. However, his attention is then drawn to a tattoo on Ojin's arm, and he decides to take a closer look at it. He realizes that this is some kind of coat of arms, and after a few seconds he gets the opportunity to examine it fully. Adrian freezes in horror, as this is the coat of arms of the Celestine family. The whole point is that this is the noblest of the elven families, possessing incredible power and not accepting just anyone into their ranks. Adrian cannot believe that a coat of arms of this kind is worn by a man who, at first glance, is of no particular note. He still has a lot to learn about the strange personality of this veterinarian, who keeps many secrets. Selena notes that she thought it was a minor wound, but the saliva turned out to be poisonous and could have caused a lot of problems. Ojin explains that Selena is lucky to have gotten off easy since they have access to the Dragora leaves. Marion apologizes for her Ruru acting hostile, but Ojin states that the unicorn didn't like Selena. Marion says she is very sorry and promises to cover all medical expenses due to the misunderstanding. Ojin explains with a smile that there is no need for this, as both were careless during the inspection. Marion is surprised and asks if this lady works here too, to which Ojin replies that she is his assistant. He explains that Selena is primarily involved in prescribing medications and also does strength work. Marion notes that everything has become clear to her now, emphasizing that such an outstanding person needs a large staff. Marion says that the clinic is new, but it is not enough for Ojin to fully realize his abilities. Ojin looks at her with genuine surprise, and Marion states that a larger clinic would suit him. Ojin speculates that the girl is so confident in her opinion only because she hasn't seen his previous clinic. The ground floor of his previous place of work was a shopping mall, so no one came to see him, and he was in the middle of nowhere. Ojin is lost in his memories for a moment, and Marion asks him in surprise if everything is okay. She notes that she is not sure if she understood everything he said, but it is obvious to her that he has been through a lot of hardship. She adds that it would have been foolish not to notice such a wonderful person as he. Marian takes a few steps towards him and tells him not to worry, because she has a keen eye. She claims that Ojin always has the best, like a clinic run by their family or something like that. Ojin wonders in his mind if this is true, and Marian claims that it was his wish that coincided with her decision. Meanwhile, the conversation is accompanied by loud arguments between Ruru and Sunja, which could escalate into a real fight. Ojin tries to calm the pets and says that they need to go down calmly and not rush with claws. Marian also tries to calm the unicorn, and asks him why he is behaving this way, trying to make him accountable for such behavior. Selena sits down and thinks, reflecting on how strange this is for a species like a unicorn. She explains to everyone that it is a known fact that unicorns love people, but they do not get along well with other animals. Ojin reflects that he and Monkeros have a lot in common, so they should have felt a closeness. Marianne indignantly asks if someone is trying to imply that her unicorn has a bad character. Selena pauses briefly, then calmly asserts that this is exactly what she was trying to say. Marianne accuses her of being insolent and rude, and Selena reminds her that she cut in line. Marianne insists that this is nonsense and shows the number she has, but Selena reminds her that she didn't get it for nothing. The thing is that she bought the number for an additional fee, but from her point of view she obtained it legally. Marianne wonders if there isn't a single well-mannered and educated employee at this clinic. Meanwhile, Ruru starts to behave extremely badly and rears up, trying to hit Ojin's assistant. Because of this, she hits the bookcase, which begins to tilt and is about to fall, crushing everyone underneath it. At this moment, Adrian flies in through the window, hoping to completely resolve the situation with his appearance. Selena, due to special problems, stops the fall of the cabinet, while the aristocrat hits the stone floor at full speed with his face. Everyone present looks in surprise at the strange body lying in the room and wonders what he is doing there. Adrian quickly gets up and says that he is glad that Lady Marian is okay, and asks them to ignore the blood. Marianne, frightened, asks what he is doing here, to which he replies that the main thing for him is that she is okay. The assistant notices that he broke into the clinic and broke a window, and Selena calmly says that he will pay for the damage. Adrian quickly preens and apologizes for frightening the ladies with his abrupt appearance. After this, he states his name, says that he is a veterinarian, and kisses the assistant's hand. A girl named Pio is surprised by the attention shown by the aristocrat. Ojin realizes that in front of him is a fake person who lives for show in front of others. Adrian does the same with Selena's hand, and Ojin asks why the doctor is breaking into someone else's clinic through the window. Adrian looks at him more aggressively and claims that everyone knows what he is doing here. He cheerfully explains that he is actually the attending physician of the unicorn Ruru, with whom he has a great bond. Coming closer, he notes that he cannot believe that the snow-white Ruru has become so pale in just a few days. He seeks to blame Ojin, claiming that if the inspection had been carried out by more qualified specialists, this would not have happened. Adrian demands an explanation of what Ojin did to the unicorn, and Ojin claims that the unicorn is completely healthy, but Adrian himself is not so much. Adrian calls him a lousy doctor and states that his behavior allows him to be called Sibararch. Ojin is surprised by such a strange word that was supposed to offend him. However, he doesn't understand what it means, so he asks Selena, who explains that it is the name of a carnivorous plant. She explains that the plant pretends to be harmless, and then grabs its victim at the right moment. She also says that this behavior is similar to the habits of a charming ladies' man, and this is where the expression comes from. Ojin notes that now everything is clear to him, and he definitely does not fit the description of this term. Marian asks her interlocutor how he is not ashamed to use such expressions towards Ojin. He adds that he didn't think he was capable of making baseless accusations, but Adrian insists that it is not baseless. He asks if Ojin has any fiancés or lovers, and if he has had any relationships with women at all. Ojin feels humiliated and explains that unfortunately, he has never had a woman. Adrian states that it is a lie, to which Ojin replies that he himself would like to believe it is a lie. But it is the truth. Adrian notices the crest on Ojin's finger and asks what the engraving is. He explains that the coat of arms is only worn by members of the Celestine family, meaning Ojin either inherited the blood or entered into a marriage alliance. Pio clarifies that the ring they gave him turned out to be an engagement ring, but Ojin claims that this is impossible. Marian asks if he is really engaged, but Ojin replies that he got it from a man named Kalyan. Everyone except Selena looks at him strangely, but Ojin declares that his soul is pure and he means no harm. He asks his assistant to explain to them the meaning of all this, but she calmly says that she has no desire to do so. Adrian notices strange sounds coming from Ruru and turns to face the animal. He asks what happened, but Ruru doesn't react to his words and doesn't try to scare him away. A few moments later, she feels ill, starts vomiting, and then enters a phase of weakness. Within seconds, she falls to the ground and loses consciousness, but her vital signs remain normal. Ojin calls on Pio to urgently bring a candle and a stethoscope to examine the animal. Ojin muses that this is strange, because before, when he rode her, she was in excellent shape. He checks her pupillary response and notes that she looks normal, but her breathing is heavy. Apparently it's not an emergency, but there are still no answers until Adrian suddenly has a clue. After listening to his stomach, he happily announces that he can congratulate Lady Marian on the great news. He reports with complete confidence that her unicorn is pregnant and will soon have offspring. The news of a unicorn's pregnancy has a less obvious impact than might be expected. Marianne says she used to think of him as an eccentric but competent doctor, but now she has a lot of questions. Marianne asks him how hard he hit his head, since there is no reason for her unicorn to get pregnant. Adrian confidently reports that there is definitely new life in Ruru's stomach, and that the recent vomiting was a manifestation of morning sickness. Selena explains that hypervigilance is also common during pregnancy, so it's possible. Marian approaches Mr. Ojin and asks him for his expert opinion, hoping that he can dispel her doubts. Ojin listens carefully to Ruru's belly with a stethoscope for a while and confirms that she is indeed pregnant. Marianne says it's simply impossible and refuses to believe it. She clarifies that Ruru lives in a greenhouse in the far garden, where one cannot enter without permission, and not even a mouse can get in there. Ojin explains that the fact of pregnancy remains a fact, after which he recommends that Marian listen to Ruru's belly herself. Marian looks at the unfamiliar devices in surprise and asks what they are, and Ojin explains how to use them. First, he places the instruments on the area where the heart is, and asks her if she can hear the heartbeat. After this, he brings the device to the stomach and says that now you need to listen to hear the second heartbeat. Marian hears perfectly well what Ojin is saying, and understands that now there can be absolutely no doubt. She feels ill and says that this simply could not have happened, and seems to start to lose consciousness. Adrian tries to support Marian and says that he will not let anything happen to her. He also asks Ojin what he did with Lady Marian, and what those suspicious devices are. And Ojin states that it's a regular stethoscope. Adrian decides to use it to deceive her, but Ojin gently hints that she did everything right beforehand. Adrian adds that as a graduate of the Royal Academy, he will be able to expose any pathetic deception. However, once he decides to use the device, he quickly falls silent, amazed at its effectiveness. He happily notes that the sounds of the body are very loud, and Ojin begins to be proud of the results of his work. They both come to the conclusion that the baby is already quite big, and Ruru is at least 4 months pregnant. Marianne claims that this simply cannot be true, since at that time she never went outside and was locked in. Ojin explains that this is a strange daily routine for such animals, as they are known for their freedom-loving nature. Marianne argues that there is a good reason for this that could not be changed. The thing is that this autumn Ruru was supposed to be mated with Shark, who is the horse of His Highness the Prince. After becoming a royal bride, she was kept under strict isolation and meticulous care, becoming a hothouse unicorn. Marianne is amazed that someone like her could get pregnant without a single living soul knowing about it. We are transported to the intensive care unit, where a makeshift IV is set up to get Ruru back on her feet. They immediately start to get indignant and ask what he's sticking into dear Ruru's body. Ojin calmly explains that this is a regular IV and there is no reason to worry. He adds that vomiting has left her depleted of electrolytes, and it will be faster to administer nutrients directly into a vein. Adrian reacts with his usual theatricality, but he is genuinely surprised. He quickly understands the genius of the system and notes that it is incredibly fast and efficient. Meanwhile, Marianne is in great sadness and is thinking hard, trying to figure out what she should do. Selena explains that in any case, mating with a prince would have been unsuccessful since unicorns are very picky. She adds that if they do not find a partner to their liking, they will be stubborn and may live their entire lives alone. She also says that once every few decades, an ordinary horse may appear that is worthy of being chosen by a unicorn. Selena emphasizes that the foal born from such a union will become a legendary racehorse that will go down in history. Adrian says that in that case, Ruru's child should be sent to the royal palace as an apology for what happened. He adds that he will be able to explain all the circumstances, and they will be understood, because they will come with prosperity. Selena phlegmatically notes that this is far from the best way, as big problems can arise. She adds that the unicorn will become legendary, but such cases are rare, so there is no confidence in this. Adrian says that Marian's estate is rich in various horses, each of which is very valuable. He immediately lists a multitude of horses, each of which is distinguished by its wealth and size. Marianne agrees that Mr. Adrian is right, and argues that they need to think of a backup plan just in case. In order to come up with a plan, they need to find out who Ruru's partner is. Adrian happily asserts that he can help in this matter, and will not let down with his skills. Marian ignores this offer and turns to Ojin, asking if he can help with this issue. Adrian's desperation becomes even more evident after Marian pleads with him, noticing the doubt in his eyes. Ojin asks her how he can help, since he is not a detective, but just a doctor who does his job well. Marianne pleads with him, saying that she will accept any help as he is an amazing person. Ojin looks closely at Adrian, and notes that this poser will be more useful in solving the issue. Ojin claims that he had difficulty determining Ruru's pregnancy using a special device, but this man found out about it earlier. He adds that the man noticed that Ruru was acting strangely. Ojin states that this man is suitable for the role, as he came because he was worried about the patient. Marianne asks if he is sure of his decision, but Selena interrupts the conversation. She explains that there is no need to complicate things, because a pregnant unicorn becomes aggressive when away from its partner. Selena asks Marianne if Ruru acted restlessly during the journey, and Marianne cannot remember anything like that. Selena reports that the animal started acting up about an hour ago, which already gives some clues. Afterwards, she asks Marianne how they got here, and Marianne replies that they got there by carriage. Marianne adds that even Ruru was riding in her own personal carriage, after which she gets an idea of what this all means. We are transported to an ordinary stable, where ordinary horses are kept, which carry aristocrats. On horseback, he turns to his stallion and says that he must ride more, because no one knows when they will have to travel again. Marianne and our heroes suddenly decide to visit them, causing the stallion to look at them in surprise and ask what they want. Suddenly, Ruru starts acting very excited, which makes everyone understand that her lover is somewhere nearby. Ojin and Marianne look around to see who is the worthy partner that Ruru has chosen. She approaches her usual gelding, and they begin to look at each other lovingly, after which they calm down. Marianne is startled by this scene and screams loudly before rushing forward. She turns to Ruru and tries to push her away, considering it a waste of potential. Looking at her partner, she notices that he is some ordinary gelding, with nothing interesting about him. Ojin recalls seeing something similar in a soap opera, realizing that similar dramas play out in real life as well. Adrian reports that their expectations were not met, but for Ruru, this stallion has already become the best partner. Marianne says that this is all a pathetic fiction, because a unicorn that is not even a year old cannot understand anything. Ojin clarifies that Ruru chose this stallion as a mate, and now he will be her descendant, and this choice must be respected. Selena notes that a pregnant unicorn becomes restless and aggressive if she is far from her partner. Marianne realizes that she is in a difficult situation, and asks the gods how this could have happened. After some time, Father Marian calls the old conifer and his heavy horse to his carpet. He asks him if he has lost his fear, adding that the unthinkable has happened, because now Ruru has lost her value. The old groom explains that he knew nothing, always drove them around, but never let them go together. The angry lord claims that he wanted to use it slowly to hear out the situation, and everything else is a lie. Another servant claims that such a thing is out of the question, since he would never dare to do such a thing. The smug aristocrat declares that there is nothing to sort out here, and that they must be thrown into prison immediately. She adds that the day of severe punishment for the encroachment they allowed themselves is coming soon. After some time, the maids note that the count acted too cruelly, because Uncle Joseph was not guilty of anything. They discuss how to deal with an animal if it is hostile, as this is similar to human behavior. The new maids note that they do not understand why they wanted to send the stallion to the palace of another prince. One of them suggests that it is connected with the selection of a bride for the prince who will be at the end of the year, and Marianne is also involved. The other maids realize that all this time, Ruru was just a tool to strengthen the alliance. The maid remarks that if everything had gone according to plan, Ruru would have lived in the royal palace. But in the end, she ended up with a simple gelding. One of them says that this behavior is typical of her owner, and the others ask what she means. The head maid suddenly appears and orders everyone to immediately shut up and not spread rumors. She notes that apparently, they will not learn wisdom until they receive appropriate punishment. Marianne goes to the greenhouse where Ruru is, and a maid runs out to meet her, reporting the trouble that has occurred. Marianne runs to visit her pet and discovers that her condition has worsened, and she is now coughing up blood. Terrified, she falls to her knees and asks if she is okay, hoping for an answer from the unicorn. The maid explains that due to toxicosis, Ruru did not eat anything for a whole day, and then she began to vomit and bleed. Marianne recalls Selena's words about a pregnant unicorn becoming aggressive when away from its partner. Marianne can't believe that Ruru is suffering so much from being separated from her gelding that she has started vomiting blood. The maid warns that if this continues, The unicorn's health will be seriously damaged and will be impossible to restore. Marian asks if Ojin Kim has arrived yet and is told that a messenger was sent this morning. The maid explains that the journey takes quite a long time, since the distance to the area is quite large. She suggests looking for another doctor in the area so that he can prescribe at least some treatment. Marianne pauses briefly, then orders him to be brought, misleading the maids. After a while, she makes it clear who exactly needs to be brought, and the servants bring a dirty and beaten gelding. The head maid stops the groom at the entrance and asks where the terrible stench is coming from this stallion. The groom explains that he tried to bring it as quickly as possible, but asks that it at least be washed. The groom objects that Marianne herself said that the matter was urgent, and there was no time to waste. Marianne finally orders them to shut up and let the horse in, as there is no time for empty talk. As soon as the stallion sees Ruru, he joyfully walks towards her, making appropriate sounds. When they are close, they rub against each other to calm down and show that they are close. This scene looks cute and makes everyone happy, as Ruru feels well for the first time in a long time. Marianne orders the maids to bring warm water and a towel, adding that she will wash the horse herself. The maids are amazed by such dedication, to which Marianne replies that they should also prepare soup for Ruru. After this, Marianne takes a towel and thoroughly wets it in warm water to speed up the washing process. She tries not to disturb the horses while they are together, and carefully washes the stallion to remove any dirt stuck to his body. After Marianne finishes washing him, she takes a closer look at Ruru, and realizes that he is an unremarkable horse. After this, she remembers the words of her parents, who asked her if everything was okay with her, and if she had gone crazy. They scolded her for the fact that the Count was dating the son of a simple merchant, emphasizing that this was unacceptable. Marianne looks at her pet and reflects on the fact that she chose such a partner for Ruru, because later she may regret it more than once. With annoyance in her voice, she says that Ruru could have enjoyed a life of luxury and lived in a lush garden all her life. Ojin carefully approaches her and asks her if this is really what Ruru wants. Marianne turns to Ojin, greets him happily, and hopes that he can help her. Ojin explains that it's normal to want a better life for your family, but humans and animals are very different. Marianne thinks for a moment and realizes that all this time they have been applying their human standards to the lives of animals. Ojin begins the treatment procedure and explains that animals may have likes and dislikes, but they do not have classes. He explains that Ruru does not consider herself superior to other horses and is unfamiliar with the concept of aristocracy. Immediately after this, he connects an IV to allow the horse to receive nutrients. He adds that the most important thing for Ruru will be to be with the one she likes, and this will be the greatest happiness for her. Marianne falls silent sadly, realizing she has made a big mistake, as Ojin hands her some herbs. He clarifies that this is only a temporary measure and the main treatment, since the main problem lies elsewhere. He adds that this problem needs to be addressed as soon as possible to prevent complications. He strongly recommends allowing them to be together to avoid relapse. After this, he turns around and says that it is time for him to go back, and Marianne asks if that is what he wants. He adds that he has come a long way and can stay at least for the night, since Ruru has only just calmed down. Ojin says he'd like to observe Ruru a little longer, but he has too many patients. He notes that the assistant he entrusted with the clinic is not very reliable, so he wants to return as soon as possible. Marianne fully understands why the two work together, but decides not to comment on his choice of personnel. Ojin smiles and says that the rest of the problems will be handled by someone else nearby. Marianne asks him in surprise what he means, after which Ojin, as if nothing had happened, points at Adrian. Marianne notices a man sitting in a tree and asks him what he is doing there and how long he has been there. They both watch him closely and wait for him to give at least some explanation of what is happening. He jumps down abruptly and apologizes for the sudden intrusion, and Ojin reminds him that it is against the law. Adrian explains that he wanted to avoid misunderstandings and only came here because he was worried about Ruru. Ojin clearly doesn't believe his words, but something more interesting catches his attention. He notices a strange object that seems familiar to him, but looks like it was made on the fly. Ojin picks up the object and asks if it is a stethoscope made from scrap materials. Looking at it, he realizes that the work is rather rough, and that using the device will be problematic. Adrian explains that it is just a prototype that he will soon refine, but Ojin hands him his device. He proudly says that a doctor must use the proper tools to be as effective as possible. After this, he turns around and says that he is going home, as he has business to attend to. Adrian watches him and realizes that Ojin is not so bad after all, even though he has some oddities. Ojin leaves with the same thoughts as Adrian, who at first seemed like an amateur to him. After some time, Marianne happily notes that Ruru decided to eat on her own and came to her senses a little. Marianne admits that she felt like the stone was suffocating her. but now she feels much better. Adrian says that love and care are the best medicine, and is surprised that Marianne takes care of her horse personally. Marianne explains that Ruru suffered because of her stubbornness, and they should have been allowed to be together from the very beginning. She admits that she may have even been jealous of Ruru, and Adrian asks, surprised, what she means. Marianne explains that when Ruru was with her, she was never as sincere as she is now, but that quickly ended. She adds that since then she has developed a habit of assessing a person's position when meeting them. Adrian points out that this is common practice among aristocrats, but Marianne claims that she did not do this as a child. He remembers his first love and says that back then it didn't matter what he wore. Smiling, she adds that at that time she was only thinking about his beautiful eyes. Marianne says she wanted to see those eyes and was willing to give up everything for it. She explains that she ultimately did this for the good of her family and some ideals. She asks herself if she is a happy person after what she has done and cannot give a definite answer. Adrian tries to support her, reminding her that first love is always unhappy. He adds that a broken heart can sometimes prevent one from noticing happiness. He also emphasizes that this prevents one from seeing love, which is very close, and one only needs to reach out to it. Adrian says that perhaps her destiny is very close, but she has not noticed it all this time. Marianne smiles, wondering why she only realized this now, before a blush appears on her face. She explains that she will not be involved in selecting a bride for the prince, and this impresses Adrian, who has already thought everything through in advance. He realizes this is his chance, and is glad that Marianne always carries her engagement ring with her so he can propose to her. However, as Adrian attempts to kneel down to retrieve the ring, Marianne declares that she will now actively pursue Ojin Kim. Adrian quickly gets to his feet and asks her why she decided to choose this particular person. Marianne explains that she will be happier if she does not become the wife of an influential man, but gains power herself. Adrian doesn't quite understand what she's getting at, and asks her to clarify her words. Marianne joyfully announces that she will certainly achieve spiritual healing and take incredible power into her own hands. Afterwards, she takes his palms and thanks him for the incredible contribution he has made to her peace of mind. She expresses her desire that he always stays by her side as a good friend whom she can always rely on. Meanwhile, Ojin sneezes, which is a characteristic sign when someone thinks about a certain person very often. After some time, Pio reads a letter stating that they have decided to accept Ruru's new partner and not to interfere with their love. She also reports that Ojin has received an offer to become Ruru's attending physician, but he decides to decline. Pio is surprised by his decision, noting that they offered 10 times the price for the treatment, but Ojin stands his ground. He explains that he would be happy to agree, but he cannot leave the clinic when he has such patients. Ojin reflects on the fact that he has been removing tartar for an hour now and still hasn't finished the procedure. At one point, he desperately wonders whether he is in a veterinary clinic or has taken up residence in a coal mine. The Hydra's masters who came here for some reason brought an artist who is trying to capture everything. After some time, Ojin finally gets to the bottom of why there is so much tartar. He takes out the wedding ring that was stuck between the Hydra's teeth, and now it is finally removed. They call him a doctor from God, capable of performing the most difficult operations without any problems. They also note that the Hydra is a precious animal given to the family, but it ate their heirloom. Afterwards, they thank him for being able to get the precious ring and cure the reptile at the same time. Ojin reports that he has not yet finished removing tartar, as there are several teeth that need to be extracted. Smiling, he states that he will have to work for about 5 more hours to finish everything. Selena advises him to manage his time more rationally, since the Hydra has several heads. Ojin realizes that he is in deep trouble and will now have to deal with one animal all day. One of the aristocrats says that the morale of Mr. Ojin Kim needs to be raised and orders that a work of art be brought. They show him the sketch, explaining that they wanted to capture Ojin's heroic appearance. They add that the drawing was done by the suggested motley artist and ask if Ojin likes it. The artist enthusiastically announces that he will finish the painting as soon as possible and present it personally. Meanwhile, the Hydra begins to wake up, which creates an undesirable situation, as they do not like to be in confined spaces. Selena quickly turns around and realizes that right now she will become the target of the giant creature. However, this does not frighten her, so she decides to use sleeping magic to immobilize the Hydra. Suddenly the window breaks again and Adrian flies into the room, ruining everything again with his recklessness. Selena is surprised that this aristocratic doctor decided to jump here and fall under the spell. Of course, Adrian immediately becomes very sleepy, causing the Hydra to calmly grab him and prepare to swallow him. A few seconds pass, and it is on its way to the stomach, so it needs to be saved as quickly as possible. Everyone present is surprised that the giant hydra was able to swallow a man with such an appetite. To deal with the hydra, Ojin put up a sign in advance stating that the reception was closed for the day. This upset people who came from far and wide to help their animal. Adrian watched this from the corner of his eye and was very angry that the women were upset. He understands that such an act is unforgivable, and that the incident must be investigated and the culprit brought to trial. Ojin asks his butler who the healing spirit is, and he replies that it is a legendary figure. The butler says that whoever can obtain the spirit of healing will be able to rule the world. Adrian calls this nonsense and is surprised that Lady Marian believed such childish tales, because it is clearly not true. He also notes that if the healing spirit does not exist, it is more like it in appearance. Adrian abruptly states that he doubts this, since the miracles this man performed make the rumors justified. He recalls that Ojin was able to restore the flying fish's ability to fly and turned the devil's apostles into an obedient cat. The butler also reminds Adrian that he treasures the medical instrument he received from Ojin. Adrian takes the instrument out of his bag and explains that he simply forgot to return it, and therefore kept it carefully. He adds that he will hand over the instrument right now, after making sure that a copy has been made. Doyle suddenly finds himself in a tree and asks why he climbed there again, since he only came to return the things. Unable to control his temper, he decides to gather information about his competitor while he still has the opportunity. Taking a closer look, he discovers that there is a huge hydra in the clinic. He has never seen such formidable creatures before and emphasizes that she really does have 2 heads, as written in the books. He is very impressed by the fact that he sees the dental treatment procedure with his own eyes. He tries to collect as much information as possible in order to later use it in his practices. Despite his incredible pride and boundless self-esteem, he is forced to admit that Ojin's medical skill is impressive. However, after a while, he notices that the situation becomes quite dangerous in just a few moments. He realizes that the beast's tail is beginning to move, which means that the hydra is gradually coming to its senses. This can only mean that the anesthesia is gradually wearing off, and the hydra is a very dangerous creature. Thus, Adrian makes the decision to immediately save Selena, despite the fact that she has everything under control. It is this kind of behavior that leads him to now remain in the belly of the hydra, which can quickly digest him. Ojin thinks that this is some kind of terrible dream, because the snake just woke up and suddenly swallowed Adrian. Selena states that Adrian was swallowed whole, so he is probably still alive and can be pulled out with magic. Ojin immediately stops her, saying that he senses something is wrong. Taking a closer look at the hydra, he notices that something is clearly wrong with it, and it is behaving unusually. Looking at her tongue, he finds that it has turned purple, although it shouldn't be. It becomes obvious that this is an attack of suffocation, as the giant hydra has swallowed a piece that is too big for it to chew. People nearby ask him if there is a way to quickly get the person out of there and save the hydra. Selena claims that the hydra needs to be put to sleep with magic, but Ojin says that this cannot be done. He explains that putting a patient to sleep in a state of suffocation is too dangerous, as he may not wake up. Ojin turns to Pio and reminds her of the method he taught her. Together they grasp the hydra from the side to help push the stuck piece out of its throat. Selena counts down, preparing to finally knock Adrian out of the animal's jaws. Timing the moment, she delivers a powerful, decisive blow that creates a strong shockwave. This technique triggers the giant hydra's reflexes, allowing it to spit out its prey. After several attempts, they finally free Adrian, who ends up almost completely covered in slime. Everyone happily begins to celebrate, hoping that he will soon come to his senses and will not need compensation. They also admire Ojin, noting that they have never seen such medical skill and emergency care in their lives. Ojin asks his assistant to check if Adrian is alive, but she uses rather harsh methods to determine if he is alive. After checking him thoroughly, she says that he is more alive than dead. She also explains that he is unlikely to be able to open his eyes for some time due to severe bruises and magic. The thing is that the magic intended for the hydra is too strong for an ordinary person and puts him to sleep for a long time. Ojin and Pio question how hard Selena hit the animal. Selena reports that Adrian's condition is normal, and his health can be described as satisfactory. She notes that he has a severe bruise on his stomach, but this is just a side effect of the procedure. She takes out a special ointment and explains that if you apply it, everything will quickly pass, and the hydra will feel good. After a while, they finish the dressing, and it's time to say goodbye to the clients. Ojin explains that cases where a pet swallows a person occur due to the owner's fault, so one must be vigilant. He also recommends being especially careful that the hydra doesn't suddenly decide to swallow people. A few days later, a painting arrives at the clinic depicting the process of rescuing Adrian from the jaws of the hydra. Selena encourages him by telling him that she heard that they made a statue about it, but Ojin only becomes upset. He comes to the conclusion that most of those present have long since gone mad, and clearly do not understand how to behave. Adrian gradually comes to his senses and wonders what happened. He recalls that it all ended with him peeping into Ojin Kim's office and then seeing the Hydra wake up. Without thinking twice, he comes to the conclusion that he ended up in heaven because he died saving a beautiful girl. Smiling, he praises himself for his incredible dedication, considering it a worthy death for a veterinarian. He hopes that if something like this can happen in this world, he would like to be born a unicorn. Additionally or optionally, he imagines the presence of a beautiful hostess next to him, although this is not necessary. Gradually this dream fades, and he feels severe pain, gradually returning to reality. Selena continues to gently shake his cheeks and asks how he feels, expressing hope that he has come to his senses. Adrian looks at the girl in surprise and realizes that she is probably his mistress. After some time, he finally realizes that he is not a unicorn, and that the person in front of him is not a man, but an elf. Selena pulls up her hood with a slight movement and announces that he has finally woken up, after which she turns away and leaves. Adrian asks where he is, and she replies that it is best to stay in bed for now and not get up. She adds that the side effects of magic will include dizziness and nausea, so you need to stay in bed for 2 to 3 days. Adrian really doesn't feel well and agrees with her recommendations. Ojin approaches him with a mug of hot drink and asks if he can sit down for a moment. He hands over the mug, explaining that it is a restorative that must be drunk to the bottom. He adds that he has contacted his estate and now he can rest peacefully in the clinic for a few days. Adrian notes that he cannot use these methods, but Ojin assures him that there is nothing wrong with this, since he himself understands everything as a doctor. With a smile on his face, he says that there is nothing more important than health, and it should always be taken care of. Adrian is greatly impressed by the care and generosity that Ojin shows. After Ojin leaves the room, Adrian admits to himself that he is ashamed of himself for being jealous of him and underestimating how good he is. Looking around, he reflects on how he too should become such a wonderful man with good manners. However, a few moments later he discovers a bill that Selena has presented him, according to which he owes a lot of money. Adrian immediately cools his attitude towards Ojin, considering him a pathetic person who is trying to extort money. Meanwhile, another interesting event occurs at the clinic, as unusual visitors arrive. When they hear about the castration procedure, they ask in surprise whether the doctor really wants their pet to change gender. Ojin explains that this only means that their animal will become like a eunuch, and this will have a positive effect on its health. Clients consider this too cruel to their pet and say they would never want to traumatize it like that. Ojin reminds them that they had talked about their pet getting weaker, and that it would be difficult for them to handle a large number of puppies. He also reminds that the female has also become weakened due to frequent births, and this is the solution to the problem. In response to further doubts, Ojin suggests calculating how many puppies they will have if the current dynamics are maintained in 5 years. A frightened man asks what joy this wolf will have left in life if he has to chew bones. Ojin is emphatic that reproduction is an instinct for animals, and human intervention can harm them. Pio tries to reassure the owners, explaining that registration will help them schedule an operation. Ojin decides to set aside a day for a lecture on this procedure, so as not to repeat the same thing over and over again. Pio suddenly announces that the next patient will be the pet of her childhood friend, who is like family to her. Ojin says that he would be very happy to fulfill this friend's request. The door opens, and a girl comes in with a giant fire chicken named Popo. Ojin carefully examines the chicken and notes that its feathers are shiny and smooth, like a healthy chicken. Pio enthusiastically says that of all her friend's pets, Popo is the largest. Ojin praises the girl for taking care of the pet, but she responds without much enthusiasm. After 20 minutes, Ojin completes the examination and reports that the animal is absolutely healthy, and there are no problems. Tyr sadly says that she has lost a little weight lately, to which Ojin replies that it is just molting. She remembers that her pet had recently had convulsions in her sleep, but Ojin is sure that she was just dreaming something. Tyr also says that yesterday the pet weakened its voice for no reason, and thinks it is some kind of contagious disease like a cold. Pio tries to calm her down, reminding her that this has happened before and there is no reason to worry. Ojin confirms that there are no deviations at the moment, so there is nothing to worry about. Tyr calms down and promises to behave more restrainedly, and not to look for illness in his pet. After a while, Pio runs out to Ojin to tell him the terrible news. She sadly says that Popo has magically disappeared and she can't find her. Tyr explains that the pet entered the room before leaving, and when she came out, it was no longer there. It had disappeared somewhere. Ojin says that all exits and windows need to be blocked, as the pet is likely in the clinic. Selena addresses the clients and asks them to remain seated and not move. Some clients explain that their pet becomes unruly if it sits for a long time and they cannot stay still. Selena decides to bring in an authoritative cat teacher whose aura silences everyone. His presence ensures good behavior of the pets, allowing them to focus on finding Popo. However, after searching the entire area, no trace of Popo is found. Ojin asks Tyr if the pet has any favorite things or objects to try to lure her out. Tyr sadly says that if Popo hasn't been found, she has probably already left the building and run away. Ojin expresses doubts, as Popo's physique does not allow her to open the doors and jump out of the window on her own. Pio suddenly remembers that Popo loves men and often hangs around them. Ojin notices that the animal prefers low voices, which explains its behavior. Tyr notes that unfortunately, this manifests itself a little strangely in the pet. She adds that it is this special attachment to men that has earned her a good reputation. Ojin remembers examining the bird and realizes that this behavior now makes sense. Selena, after listening to him, says that there is one place where Popo is most likely located. They decide to go into the room where the man is, who turns out to be Adrian. Ojin and Pio analyze the picture before their eyes and come to the conclusion that they really liked Adrian. After this, he turns to the pet's owner and says that it is time to talk. Looking at her intently, he asks why she did this, hinting that all this is not an accident. Ojin adds that he realized from the very beginning that something was wrong here, even from Tyr's behavior during the examination. He notes that he has met many people during his time working at the clinic, but this is the first time he has seen such a hostess. Looking at Tyr, he asks why she is disappointed that the pet turned out to be completely healthy. Ojin explains that despite its speed, the chicken is not easy to miss due to the difference in stride length. He adds that the pet would not have been able to hide from human eyes, and certainly could not have opened the door and entered the room on its own. He is becoming more and more serious, and demands at least some explanation of what is going on here. Tyr says in a sad voice that if she says that her pet is sick or missing, no one will believe her anyway. After this, she adds that if such a famous person as the doctor says this, they will believe him. Ojin looks at her in surprise and asks who should believe, and for what purposes this is necessary. Tyr pauses briefly, then announces that Baroness Grace is to blame for everything. After this, sincere tears appear in her eyes, and she begs the protagonist to save her and her pet. She also adds that if Popo is diagnosed healthy now, she will simply be eaten. The thing is, there are hunting competitions scheduled for next month, and a banquet is being held at Baroness Grace's estate. Tyr says that, according to rumors, even His Highness Prince Theo, in whom the Baroness is very interested, will arrive that day. That's why she decided to cook Popo, to impress with an incredibly tender dish. Ojin, Selena, and Pio are very impressed by this story, and cannot believe that someone could be so cruel. Pio asks if the Baroness is in her right mind, and why on earth she's going to eat someone else's pet. Pio adds that her estate has a huge number of giant chickens that could be used for this purpose. Tyr says she heard that they all died due to an epidemic at the end of last year. Ojin is surprised to notice that there are a huge number of foods other than chicken, and the fixation on Popo is incomprehensible. Tyr explains that according to folk beliefs, it will become clear that her chicken is good for male potency. The fact is that this animal is a symbol of fertility due to its qualities and high fertility. Ojin realizes with horror that there are people everywhere who are trying to eat other people's abilities in order to take possession of them. Tyr adds that Baroness Grace had been eyeing Popo before, not hiding her envy and desire to try her meat. After this, she reports that they were threatened with being kicked off the farm if they did not give up the pet. Pio says that such blackmail should never be forgiven, as it is beyond good and evil. Tyr approaches the protagonist and asks him to diagnose any illness in order to save Popo. She adds that if the diagnosis is officially confirmed, people will certainly believe it, and this will help save the pet. Ojin looks at her carefully, after which he apologizes and says that he is not ready to do such things. This causes surprise in everyone who observes, and it becomes interesting to know the reason for such an act. Ojin claims that a doctor who begins to falsify his diagnoses ceases to be a doctor at that very moment. He adds that at this point the doctor turns into a con man who can trade lives. He asks himself whether, after such an act, he will be able to treat other animals with a clear conscience. Adrian waits for the events to end and remarks that this is simply funny, naive, and stupid. After this, he wonders whether professional ethics are really more important than someone's life. He tries to remind the protagonist that a doctor's calling goes beyond a simple professional role. He tries to imagine the consequences and asks how one can call oneself a veterinarian after this. Ojin admits the possibility of a fake diagnosis and says that a diagnosis can be made on demand. He adds that this requires diagnosing the animal with a serious disease that can be transmitted to humans. He emphasizes that in this case, the the pet will instantly become a carrier of a dangerous infection and will simply be locked up. He asks what will happen to him and the other animals that were in the chicken coop, since they are potential carriers. He adds that the chicken coop will simply be closed, and in the best-case scenario, they may require the destruction of the entire flock. Ojin warns that if the consequences are not revealed and later epidemics occur elsewhere, it will be very bad. He agrees with Adrian's idea that a doctor's calling is to save lives, but there is one caveat. He adds that if a person is willing to risk one life for the sake of hundreds or thousands of others, then he cannot be called a good doctor. He also adds that anyone who disagrees with this has no place in medicine, as they are not willing to make sacrifices. Tyr begins to cry and apologizes for his naivety, noting that, apparently, he will not be able to change what was destined. After a while, Pio takes her outside and tries to console her, saying that there must be a way to help. The unfortunate girl comes to the conclusion that all she can do is try to run away somewhere far away to save her pet. Ojin and Selena come closer to them and say that this is not necessary, as there are more suitable methods. Approaching Popo, he notes that as a doctor he is unlikely to be able to help, but this does not mean that he is inactive. Smiling, he states that he is as much the pet's owner as Tyr is, and from that point of view, he will show solidarity. Pio and Tyr remark that he is the best person they have ever met. Ojin gives the command to go to the Baroness's estate to spread a very interesting rumor. After this, he turns to the man who had been following them all this time, and eavesdropping on their every word. Adrian wonders how he knew about this, while Ojin recommends that he come out from behind the corner. He adds that this person will play a very important role in the case, so he needs to listen carefully to everything. After some time, we are transported to a ball in this barony, where Ojin's plan will be implemented. The noblewomen are discussing that Lady Marian has withdrawn her candidacy for the role of princess, and now the Baroness has a chance. The Baroness herself reflects on the fact that if such a competitor has disappeared from her, then her daughter's chances will increase slightly. She thinks with anticipation that when her daughter becomes a princess, all those who despise them will come to an end. She reports that thanks to the money they were so picky about, she was able to invite the prince himself. The Baroness reflects that at this banquet her daughter will certainly catch the eye of the prince, and fate will finally smile. Suddenly she hears a very pleasant male voice behind her, which addresses exclusively her and demands her attention. The radiant Adrian decides to use his charm, and says that if she doesn't mind, he would like to talk to her. The Baroness finds him very attractive, and feels as if she is in a dream when she is near him. Adrian says that he graduated from the Royal Academy, and is well acquainted with Prince Theo, with whom he studied in the same class. The Baroness asks him what kind of man His Highness the Prince was, and Adrian feigns thought. He says that this man is very sensitive to fashion trends, and the Baroness decides to immediately update the interior. She also asks him if he knows anything about the prince's taste in food, and what dishes would be his favorites. Adrian looks at her and asks if she is really going to treat him to some incredible dishes. Noticing her embarrassment, he says that this is absolutely normal, because there is nothing more exciting than treating a prince. He adds that in that case, he can introduce her to a regular merchant who works only with high society. The Baroness displays incredible enthusiasm, and says that if such a person exists, she wants to meet him immediately. After some time, they find themselves in a very unsightly hut, which is located somewhere in the middle of the forest. The Baroness is surprised by the meeting place, and mentally reflects on how pathetic and unworthy of her presence it is. However, suddenly, out of nowhere, a disguised Ojin appears, introducing himself as Louis Python, along with his assistant. The Baroness mentally wonders who these strange people are, while Ojin states that their chef has finished preparing the desserts. He adds that this dessert is a real hit, which drove all foreign aristocrats crazy with its taste. As soon as they open the special lid for this dish, it becomes clear that it is a strawberry on a stick. Ojin hands her a dessert that had not yet been invented at that time, and wants her to try it. The Baroness quickly realizes that this dish has a simply unearthly taste. She compares it only to the incredibly skillful dance of a man and a woman during a quality ballet. She is surprised that such a taste even exists, and understands that these people are true geniuses and professionals in their field. Adrian continues the theatrical performance and insists on showing the real treasure, not just some sweets. He says that, according to rumors, they have started preparing dishes with magic that turns back time. He adds that these are the fruits of immortality, which allow people to become much younger than they actually are. Ojin plays along with him and says that nothing can be done against his knowledge. He adds that he cannot guarantee immortality, but it can be called a cure for old age. After this, he demonstrates with incredible pathos the immortal pea called the joy of a chick. Ojin confidently claims that if you cook rice from it and eat it, aging will slow down, and the risk of age-related diseases will be reduced. The Baroness shows the utmost interest in his food, and says that she is ready to give money for everything he has. Ojin tries to cool her ardor, and says that it will be a little difficult due to the limited quantity. He also adds that all the goods are already reserved and they cannot throw products around left and right. Adrian asks him for a favor, and says that he is his regular customer and deserves some kind of privilege. Ojin explains that the customer who ordered it intends to present it as a gift to the prince, so they have special conditions. The Baroness asks in surprise if there is a lady in this client's family who could be married to the prince. Ojin asks in surprise how she managed to guess so shrewdly, and says that she did. The Baroness says she is willing to pay double the customer's price to get the goods. Ojin notes that they trade not for money, but for a higher purpose. He proudly declares that their goal is truth, humanism, and health. He also says that their world remains calm, and Selina understands that her boss has gone too far. The Baroness feels very uncomfortable, realizing that she has not shown her best side in front of such people. Adrian continues to insist and says that he has to sell the goods, and he doesn't need it anymore. He adds that if you sell a product to people who need it most, that is an expression of humanism. Ojin feigns thoughtfulness and agrees that there is some truth in the words. He adds that only this time, as a last exception, will he allow this product to be purchased. Ojin stops the Baroness briefly and informs her that there is one small clarification regarding the dish. He explains that the grain is called a pea not only because it resembles a chicken shape. He adds that it contains the mana of a sacred beast, the order of giant fire chickens. He adds that this creature is very attached to its species, so if you eat peas, you cannot eat chicken for some time. Of course, this is an absolute lie, but it has a strong effect on an impressionable person. The Baroness is very saddened by this news, and asks what will happen if the ban is broken. Ojin states that in this case, all the properties of peas will be reversed. Rapid aging and other consequences will occur. He adds that this is fraught with rapid hair loss, which particularly frightens the Baroness. The Baroness wonders if she should return the money right now, but the syndrome of irreversible losses is beginning to choke her. Adrian agrees that in modern times no one eats chicken dishes except for some old people. Ojin suddenly says that his father also often orders fire chicken to maintain his virility. They start laughing and point out that these are just American tales that are not supported by anything. The Baroness tries to play along with them to appear involved and says that the chicken dish is stupid. The next day, things fortunately return to normal, and Tyr comes to Ojin. She sincerely thanks him for saving her pet, adding that she certainly could not have handled it on her own. Ojin hands her a special carrier that will fit her chick, adding that he ordered it with money he received from the Baroness. Tyr looks at him in surprise and asks if he is really ready to give her such an expensive gift. Ojin says that there is nothing unusual about it, while Mandy looks at Popo with irritation. Having gained strength, she makes a powerful spit directly on the chicken's head to punish it. Popo does not leave this unnoticed, and looks closely at the impudent animal that has allowed itself to go too far. Deciding not to stand on ceremony, it tries to swallow the animal whole, and they have to be separated. Popo ends up in a cage, and Ojin tells her that it's best for her to stay away from such animals to avoid trouble. He also thanks Adrian for the efforts he made to resolve the conflict. After a while, he rummages through the bag and gives him 7 gold coins, which upsets Adrian a little. He explains that the cost of treatment, accommodation, etc. is deducted from this amount, and therefore only 312 silver coins remain. Adrian grabs his clothes and accuses him of cheating, asking how dare he charge for such lousy treatment. Selina clarifies that she carried out the treatment, and Adrian emphasizes that it was carried out very professionally. Selina recommends continuing to take the medication she prescribed, and Adrian promises to do so every day. After he leaves the place, Selina asks Ojin if he really decided to let the patient go so easily. Ojin asks what the problem is, to which she replies that it would be good if there was another doctor at the clinic. He adds that this man is a good healer, and they have managed to work together well during their time together. Ojin says there's a grain of truth in her words, but for now he feels pretty good about the current state of affairs. Meanwhile, in an unknown location, aristocrats are drinking tea and discussing the hunting competition that will soon begin. One of them says that he thought that by this time the Monoceros would already be in his hands, but the situation has become more complicated. This man turns out to be the third heir to the kingdom named Theos, who is very upset by the absence of a powerful being. He turns to Baron Doyle, who has arrived to pay his respects, and asks how it happened that they never caught him. Doyle apologizes and explains that he is always looking for opportunities, but the house is never empty. Theos says that seeking opportunities in secret is a third-class approach, unworthy of nobility. He argues that it is better to take everything in plain sight, demonstrating audacity and courage. Doyle agrees, and admits that Theos is absolutely right, and that he himself was stupid for not having come up with such a solution earlier. Theos says that his older brothers have been up to something lately and it can't be ignored. He adds that in order to suppress all the dissolute types at once, he needs the power of the great Monoceros. He also says that if he doesn't take the throne, they will be in big trouble because of what they have already done. After that, he suddenly asks if it is possible to make the damned wolf shut up for at least a minute. Doyle explains that it's lunchtime and his wolf is really craving some potatoes. The wolf is offered delicious cucumbers, but he wrinkles his nose, demonstrating serious pickiness in food. After that, he looks at the bowl of popcorn that the Baroness recently bought and decides that this is his chance. In a few moments, he makes a powerful lunge towards the servant to scatter the popcorn and grab him in his mouth. Theos is incredibly surprised that the dog can act so quickly in the presence of an aristocrat. All he can do is watch the stupid wolf, who is chewing a large amount of popcorn as if nothing had happened. Theos angrily turns to the Baron, who apologizes to him and promises to compensate him tenfold for the damages. Meanwhile, at Ojin Kim's clinic, a very intense operation that required a patient is coming to an end. Ojin states that when a patient comes out of anesthesia, he may fall and get hurt, so he needs to be watched closely. The owner of a dog that was neutered looks at his pet with tears in his eyes and says that he is now crippled. Ojin doesn't share his pessimism and says it's time to move on to the next patient. To his surprise, Tyr comes to him and says that they have come again for a routine checkup. Ojin asks what's wrong, and Tyr explains that it's not Popo, but her brother, Chief, who has been very lethargic lately. She adds that he coughs frequently, and Ojin assumes it's a cold along with some mild muscle pain. He hands her the medicine and explains that it needs to be given once a day, and that the puppy needs to be given warm water to drink more often. The next day, Tyr comes again with the same patient and reports that there is no improvement, and the puppy is sick. Ojin discovers that he has the same symptoms, and tries to figure out how a dog and a chicken could have the same disease. He suspects that it is something contagious, so it is better to keep them in the hospital to avoid infecting others. The next day, Tyr arrives with a large group of animals, reporting that they too have fallen ill, and she does not know the cause. Ojin tries to understand how animals from another room could have contracted the disease in just one day. However, after a while, an idea dawns on him when he remembers the symptoms that other clients came with. Everyone had the same complaints, but he didn't pay any attention to them at the time. He suggests that this may be an outbreak and asks all owners to cover their nose and mouth. He says that after contact with animals, you should never touch anything with your hands and wear gloves. P.O. states that animals showing cold symptoms and lethargy should be sent to the second floor, while the rest should be sent to the first floor. Ojin understands that these symptoms themselves are not very severe, but the widespread incidence of the disease is alarming. He also notes that medications are not helping them, and it is impossible to predict whether the situation will get worse in the near future. Selena emphasizes that the fact that the disease does not spare any animal species is a serious problem that needs to be addressed somehow. She states that at this rate a large-scale epidemic will soon begin, and this should be avoided at any cost. Unfortunately, a few days later her predictions come true, and a huge number of people appear at the clinic's gates. O-jin apologizes to them, explaining that there is no more space at the clinic, and asks them to go to another hospital. They tell him that other hospitals are also overcrowded, and therefore they simply have nowhere to go. Ojin realizes that the situation is dire when suddenly the Lord himself comes to him, loudly addressing him. He brought his beloved giant rabbit, explaining that it would be great if they could examine it. Ojin wonders how the pet could have gotten infected if he doesn't leave the house. He asks if the Lord ever took his pet for a walk, to which he replies that since then they have only played at home. The Lord adds that the pet was bored, and so he found her a friend, but apparently, he brought the infection with him. Ojin apologizes to him, explaining that an examination is not possible at the moment, despite his desire to help. He adds that the hospital is overcrowded with inpatients, and the Lord asks if that is the whole problem. After this, Ojin turns to the butler and asks which building is closest to here. He explains that the nearest building is 2 alleys behind, and it will be easy to combine work in both places. The Lord says he is willing to lend him the building so that more animals can receive quality treatment. Ojin asks if the Lord has ever thought of appointing someone there, to which he replies that such an idea has not occurred to him. So they begin to manage a temporary branch, and at first glance it may seem that the problem is finally solved. However, in reality this is far from the truth, since he will now have to treat patients in 2 buildings at once. Ojin realizes that he needs another doctor to cope with such a large influx of patients. Meanwhile, Adrian continues to be in his clinic, and is surprised that there is not a single soul here today. The butler explains that due to Adrian's frequent absences, even those rare clients who usually came in stopped coming. Adrian resentfully says that it's all Ojin Kim's fault, but he claims he's not the cause. The butler adds that an epidemic is raging in the city, and a request for help will certainly come from there. Adrian notes that if this proud man asks for help, it will be extremely funny. After a while, another butler comes and announces that a letter from Mr. Ojin Kim has just arrived. Adrian smiles and asks the butler to read the letter himself, hoping that Ojin will be forced to politely ask for help. The letter says that Ojin actually didn't want to write to him until the very end, but the situation got out of control. Ojin explains that he has no choice, emphasizing that Adrian is, as always, in a lull with patients, so he can help. He asks to take with him all the supplies of medicines and medical instruments, promising to raise the hourly rate by several %. Adrian says it's the most disgusting request for help he's ever received, and adds that he'll burn the letter. The butler reports that there is another sheet with information that Selena is exhausted from overwork. A few moments later, Adrian gathers everything he needs and prepares to leave, noting that he won't be able to return for a long time. The butler asks how he will return, and receives the answer that Adrian will not return until the epidemic is over. He adds that he must first be where the disease is in order to constantly fight it. The world's first epidemic has begun, so the clinic staff is taking steps to reduce the scale of the problem. Pio explains to clients that if an animal shows symptoms, it is essential to follow the necessary rules. Adrian quickly gets to the clinic and spends 12 hours working non-stop to constantly examine the animals. Selena, meanwhile, has been giving medication for 26 hours straight without a single minute's break. Ojin works even longer, and despite being seriously tired, he continues to do his job no matter what. The entire staff is gradually exhausted from endless overtime, when suddenly Max comes to see them. Ojin looks sadly at his old friend and asks how he managed to get infected. Sven brought another dog with him, explaining that, ironically, he now spends a lot of time looking after it. He says that these are the animals that were supposed to take part in hunting competitions, but now they are seriously ill. He sadly notes that the epidemic came completely unexpectedly, and the competition is just around the corner. Tyr says the hospital is already overcrowded, but Ojin says they'll arrange for more space. Ojin explains that everything possible must be done to find a treatment that will help the animals. Sven bows his head in respect and thanks him for the incredibly difficult sacrifice Ojin is willing to make to help. Adrian asks why he continues to accept patients even though there is no room left. He adds that they have already exceeded the examination capacity of the two of them, and they will need another doctor to make it in time. Ojin says that the situation must be dealt with at any cost, as the lives of many animals depend on it. Pio notes that owners are starting to want to take their pets back because they are starting to lose trust in the clinic. According to her, the owners believe that if it is just a mild cough, there will be no problems in everyday life. Ojin states that if it were people, he might consider it, but he can't just let animals go. He says it will be simply terrible if the hunting dogs that Mr. Sven brought can no longer hunt. He also states that animals that have become useless are abandoned far more often than one might imagine. Ojin emphasizes that Mr. Sven is a good person, so he is unlikely to do such a thing, but no one knows how others will behave. He adds that this applies not only to hunting dogs, but also to all other animals they have. From his point of view, the longer animals are sick, the more problems they cause, and not everyone can withstand this. At night, Ojin continues to try to create a cure using the dragon's power and his honest thoughts. However, despite everything, for some reason nothing works out for him, and apparently, this necklace is not all-powerful after all. Selena asks him to stop, explaining that overusing the dragon's power could harm his heart. She states that he needs to get some proper rest because if he rushes into this matter, nothing good will come of it. She adds that the epidemic appears to have a much more complex cause than might initially be thought. Ojin wonders if it's all because of mana, and reasons that he should have learned at least some magic. Selena asks how long he has been awake, and Ojin replies that he has been up for 3 days. Selena realizes that negotiating with him is pointless, and delivers a powerful blow to the top of his head to knock him out. Ojin's mind immediately switches off, and Selena calmly carries him to the bed, adding that he needs to rest. 5 hours later, Ojin jumps out of bed and wonders where he is and how he managed to fall asleep. Tyr immediately greets him and brings him breakfast, explaining that she is glad that he woke up and recommends that he eat to gain strength. Ojin looks at the very impressive fried eggs and notes that they are fresh and delicious. Tyr says that Popo laid these eggs this morning, and the protagonist feels a little awkward. After this, he turns his gaze to her and says that he still hasn't seen her, although several days of the epidemic have already passed. Tyr explains that Popo has been at home all this time, and Ojin asks why she is there. Tyr says with a slight smile that she is not infected, so there is no reason to take her to the clinic. Ojin notes that out of all the animals in the house, she was the only one who got sick, and no one else, to which Tyr suggests that Popo is simply very healthy. Looking around, she says that Sunja is also feeling fine, despite being in the clinic. Ojin remembers that even in this clinic, which is full of patients, Sunja behaves like an ordinary cat. He is trying to understand what these animals have in common and why they have not yet become infected. Ojin thinks for a long time, but still doesn't come to a specific conclusion, because the animals are too different. After some time, his thoughts are interrupted by another quarrel between the mandrake and Sunja, which Pio tries to separate. He notices that the mandrake is spitting towards Sunja and constantly hitting her head. Ojin immediately remembers that Popo also received mandrake the last time she was at their clinic. He guesses that the key to the mystery is probably related to the mandrake's saliva, and decides to conduct tests immediately. He takes Sunji's saliva and places it on a special glass slide for careful examination. He also placed there experimental grass, contaminated with the patient's saliva, which looked withered. Ojin reasons that if the leaves turn green again under the influence of this herb, it can be considered a cure. His guess is correct, and the plant quickly takes on a healthy appearance, which gives serious hope. Ojin, Adrian, and Pio begin to praise Mandy, noting that she is the best mandrake they have ever seen. However, the question of production immediately arises, since saliva is essentially plant juice. They understand that it is impossible to simply squeeze all the juice out of it, otherwise the plant will die, and they need to act differently. At this time, Selena decides not to talk to anyone in particular, and begins to implement her plan. She quickly prepares a small vessel, and places it next to the mandrake, which immediately pays attention to it. Mandy sniffs the straw for a while, and then begins to drink the cocktail with pleasure, showing that she really likes it. Selena takes another glass and carefully brings the mandrake leaf to its rim. It quickly becomes clear that a drop is flowing from it, which can be expressed to create a medicine. Ojin receives a whole glass of the stuff almost immediately, and comments that it's incredible they were able to collect so much. He looks happily at the employee and asks how she managed to get Mandy drunk. Selena calmly explains that she mixed sugar water, which the mandrake loves, with a nutrient solution for growing herbs. She explains that she added a diuretic to speed up the flow of juice, and Ojin feels slightly unwell. He reassures himself that it is a tonic, and since mandrake is a plant, there is nothing to worry about. The next day, the first patient they decided to try the drug on recovers quite quickly. Ojin looks at Max happily and says that he did well, after which he thanks him. After this, the vaccination procedure begins, and all that remains is to wait for the vaccines to finally take effect. Pio happily reports that this was the last patient, and now the prognosis for overcoming the epidemic is very positive. Ojin happily notes that in such a case, special medications need to be prescribed and finishes these matters for today. Suddenly there is a loud knock on his door, and irritated voices order him to leave the clinic immediately. Doyle arrives with his guards and announces that Ojin has been arrested but must now stand trial. The nearby residents look at the Baron in surprise and ask what happened and why he decided to arrest someone again. Ojin opens the door with an irritated smile and asks what reason they have come today. Doyle explains that they haven't seen each other for a long time, then repeats that Ojin has been arrested for spreading the epidemic. Ojin asks if he has any proof that he is actually doing this. Doyle recalls that Ojin himself said that this messenger of the devil would spread an epidemic, and that is exactly what happened. Ojin rubs his eyes in irritation, realizing that he really had been careless enough to say a couple of unnecessary phrases. After a while, he admits that he did say something similar some time ago. He also points to Sunji's head, saying that they did everything perfectly, since the mark on that cat's forehead disappeared along with the epidemic. Ojin wonders what someone like Morocco would do with him, and Doyle claims he wanted to profit from the treatment. Immediately after this, Doyle orders Ojin to be taken away so that everything can be cleared up during interrogation. Doyle adds that in order to gather evidence and prevent a relapse, they will take another creature with them. He hints at the cat, noting that she will also go with them, whether Ojin likes it or not. Ojin realizes that the epidemic is just an excuse, as they actually came to take Sunja away. Pio suddenly comes to her employer's defense, saying that her boss is definitely not that kind of person. She accuses Doyle of blind greed, and the aristocrats ask her how she dares to behave like that towards him. Pio adds that he tried very hard to defeat the epidemic, but Ojin stops her, saying that there is no need to swear. He smiles and notes that there is no need for that, as he already knows what will happen next. After this, he turns to Doyle and his guards, saying that there is no point in wasting time, and suggests that they move on. He also suggests at least giving Sunju a sleeping pill before trying to transport her like this. Doyle states that there is no need for this, as they brought a steel net to restrict her movement. Ojin reminds them that she is clearly not an ordinary animal, so that they will remember how hard it was to catch her. Ojin adds that if she gets hurt, it will be bad for everyone, and Doyle agrees, only asking that he get his business done faster. Ojin asks Selena for a sleeping pill to temporarily put the cat to sleep and make her more obedient. He slowly leans toward her, explaining that when he gives the signal, she should know what to do. Selena warms up her knuckles and says that she is ready at any moment and is only waiting for a command from him. Ojin becomes nervous, explaining that he meant something else, adding that she should use magic and escape with Sunja. Selena turns away in disappointment, which greatly surprises Ojin, as he didn't think she liked fighting. After a while, the sleeping pill begins to take effect, and Sunja collapses on her back like an ordinary cat and falls asleep. Ojin hands over the cage with her, noting that now he will do exactly as they agreed. At the last second, he uses the light skill imbued in the finger crest to deceive his opponents. After successfully bypassing the enemies, he asks Selena to act faster so that she can escape. Selena decides to use a simpler method and delivers a powerful blow directly to the faces of her opponents. While holding the cage with the cat, she throws several people in different directions. Immediately after this, she runs away, beaming with pride for winning this fight. Doyle rubs his eyes and orders that these people be detained, adding that the cat is more important than the doctor. Ojin notes that they have shown their true colors, and Doyle grabs him by the clothes, saying that he will not forgive this. He turns to the mercenaries and orders them to destroy everything so that the clinic cannot be restored. Pio stands in their way, saying that he will not allow the place where people are treated to be destroyed. She adds that if they try to destroy the furniture, she will not forgive them. The mercenary looks at the girl with irritation and asks if she isn't tired of being an eyesore. Adrian comes to Pio's defense, saying that they should stop, which surprises everyone. He begins to threaten them, noting that if they touch the girl, he will not forgive them, and the aristocrat's wrath is terrible. Ojin notes that this scoundrel had not interfered before, and calmly watched as he was almost knocked down. Doyle says there are too many witnesses and they need to leave, adding that only Ojin Kim will be detained. Pio tries to defend her employer, but he reassures her that there is nothing to worry about. He tells her and Adrian that while he is gone, they must take care of the clinic and receive visitors. After this, he goes forward, thinking that now all hope lies with Selena, and that she can be saved. The next morning, citizens begin to discuss rumors that the epidemic was caused by Ojin. Some of them claim he was trying to profit from the drugs, and add that a public trial will soon be held. They want to see this person in person while he is catching up on lost sleep after long overtime. After some time, he begins to wake up due to loud voices and demands to get up immediately. He looks at them menacingly and demands to know when they hid the cat and the elf who ran away with her. Ojin lazily stands up and yawns, wondering why he suddenly needs to know about this if it happened spontaneously. Doyle explains that if Ojin refuses to cooperate voluntarily, he will have to resort to the well-known torture methods. He points to the other wolves and notes that they have been very bored lately and now they need to have some fun. Ojin notices that one of the wolves is acting very strangely and pays closer attention to it. He quickly realizes that it is Doyle's pet wolf Magma, who is acting like he is in a really bad way. Ojin examines him closely and concludes that he seems to have a stomachache, asking if he has had any unusual symptoms. Doyle looks at his pet and notes that something is definitely wrong with him this morning. Ojin asks what exactly happened, and Doyle explains about the blood. Ojin quickly stands up and pushes him away, saying that they need to examine the wolf immediately before it's too late. After this, he carefully approaches the dog, examines it and calls it a good boy. After Magma lets him get closer, Ojin quickly examines him and realizes that he has a hernia. Ojin notes that the condition is very serious, and is surprised at how things could have gotten to this point. He turns to the owners with apprehension and says that immediate surgery is needed. He warns them that if they delay even a little, Magma could die. Meanwhile, a hooded figure gradually approaches the Baron's estate, trying not to make any unnecessary sounds. In the silence, Sunja's aggressive hissing and growling sounds can be heard periodically. Selena reports that there is nothing to worry about yet. Ojin is fine, but he will be called out of captivity very soon. The castle is in complete chaos as Magma needs to be transported to a clean room as quickly as possible. Ojin demands that the necessary tools and medicines be prepared, after which he begins disinfection along with the other servants. He sets up a portable operating room, and servants, dressed in special aprons, begin to assist in the operation. One of the servants hands Doyle an apron, noting that it should be worn to prevent infection. Ojin demands to check the dog's temperature, adding that another operating board needs to be prepared in 5 minutes. After using the tweezers, he demands that they be immediately disinfected and re-prepared. Doyle watches the scene carefully without saying a word, as if it reminds him of something. Ojin demands that the door be closed immediately to prevent a draft, as this could harm the patient. Doyle quickly walks out into the hallway, and the servants discuss whether Ojin can be trusted, since he does not have warm feelings for them. One of them adds that he has never heard of a disease called a hernia. Another confirms his suspicions, noticing that the insides are falling out. Doyle abruptly interrupts them, saying that there can be no talk of Ojin lying, which surprises the servants. He looks at the portrait of a beautiful dog and notes with heaviness in his voice that Magma's mother died tragically from the same symptoms. Pleasant memories are immediately replaced by bitterness, and he mentally wonders if she suffered from the same thing. He loved this dog named Angela as much as he loved her son, and the thought that he could save him makes the loss a little easier. After some time, he has brought a huge number of documents, which turn out to be petitions. Doyle questions the contents of the petition and learns that they are all demanding the release of Ojin Kim. He also receives a letter from Lady Marian Astrid, and Doyle realizes that she is quite a wayward girl. Doyle carefully examines the letter, which states that if Ojin is not released, she will complain to the king. A few moments later, the servant reports that the operation was successful. Doyle happily runs into the room, wanting to make sure his dear pet is okay. Magma feels great, although she is under anesthesia, after which the servant informs her that the stitches will be removed in a week. Doyle carefully approaches the weakened animal and bends over it, expressing gratitude to God. Afterwards, he turns his gaze to Ojin Kim, noticing that he is sleeping, and remembers that he has not slept lately due to the epidemic. The henchmen advise taking him back to the dungeon immediately so as not to raise unnecessary questions. Doyle takes a closer look at Ojin's hands and discovers serious marks on them from a long-standing relationship. Doyle orders the servants not to put any shackles on him so that he can sleep properly. Ojin finds himself back in the dungeon, but is given minimal comfort to avoid sleeping on the cold floor. He finds himself in his room and hears strange voices, which soon begin to resemble his parents' voices. He realizes it's a dream and hears his parents talking, wishing he hadn't become a veterinarian. After a while, someone else appears, and this time a large animal approaches him. Ojin can't figure out what it is, and at first he thinks it's either a cat or a giant lion. A lion's tongue touches his cheek, and Ojin reflects that he doesn't remember treating such an animal. After a while, his entire body is covered with warmth, and he joyfully continues to sink into oblivion. Meanwhile, Theos wonders how they managed to miss the Monoceros during a routine arrest. Doyle notes that the animal appears to have been taken over by the Order of Etherian, which appeared out of nowhere. Theos wonders what this means, as no one has reported on the Order's activities before. Doyle claims that the elf who was with the veterinarian turned out to be a spy for this order. He adds that he recently received a report about this girl's contact with a group of suspicious elves. Theos understands that these are very serious people who are better not to cross, so he decides to retreat. He irritably notes that his subordinates are useless and cannot do anything properly. Doyle apologizes to His Highness and asks if Ojin Kim can be released on this occasion. He emphasizes that the constant complaints are a big inconvenience because people love Ojin. Theos states that he can do whatever he wants, and Ojin pulls him out, after which he strives to wake up the next morning. Ojin leaves instructions to the servants, informing them that he has written rules for them to follow. They also say that they will soon bring their hunting dog so that it can be examined. Ojin thanks them for their polite treatment at the end of the visit, and they promise that such detentions will not happen again. However, as soon as he steps outside the castle, he immediately encounters a large number of people joyfully running towards him. Ojin asks what they are doing here, surprised at how friendly these people are towards him. The lord of the city reports that they have been waiting all this time for him to be released to meet him. Sven emphasizes that if they had been held back a little longer, they would have tried to storm the castle. Ojin tries to thank them, when suddenly Sunja, who missed him very much, jumps right in his face. Ojin also finds Selena and is glad that she is okay, to which she notes that it was not difficult. Ojin looks at Sunja and tells her that he saw someone very similar to her in his dream yesterday. He smiles and notes that he made the right decision when he became a veterinarian and dedicated his entire life to it. Observing this, one of the Baron's servants asks his master if Ojin will really be released just like that. He recalls the events of this morning, saying that they clearly saw everything that was there. We are, of course, talking about the creature that was in Ojin Kim's cell when they decided to look there. Doyle and his servant froze on the spot and were unable to utter a word from surprise and horror. This cat looked like Sunja, but he clearly had a lesson to learn, and after a few moments he simply disappeared into thin air. The servant notes that at first glance it was clear that this was an unusual animal with strange skills. Doyle turns to him and says that he sincerely doesn't understand what he's talking about. To the servant's surprise, he asks what was in Ojin Kim's cell. After this, he turns around and says that they didn't see anything, and the servant apologizes for such stupidity. Doyle silently reflects that there is no point in continuing this conversation since Ojin has just won. A few days later, he receives the bill for the operation, and he remarks that it is an unthinkable amount, and he will never forgive Ojin. The next day, Adrian comes into their clinic outside the city with a sincere smile and greets Mrs. Selina. Ojin is surprised by the sudden visit, noting that he has the herbs they talked about. Selina nods calmly and says that they are very difficult to find at this time of year. Adrian says that nothing is impossible for him, and he is ready to bring any herbs she wishes. Selina hands him a long sheet of paper with names, and clarifies that in that case, she will need this too. After this, she begins to take inventory and notes that all the herbs here are in excellent condition. Adrian holds out the sample she spoke about at such length, but the unknown creature quickly snatches it from her hands. Adrian turns around to see Blob preparing to devour this valuable natural artifact. Adrian tries to take it, but Blob quickly bites him, testing his resistance to the max. Immediately after this, he delivers several blows to the cheek to discourage the aristocrats from encroaching on his food. Adrian notes that, as expected, all of Ojin Kim's personal pets have nasty personalities, just like their owner. Selina says the hamster is hers, and Adrian adds that it's not surprising, considering how well she knows about herbs. Pin looks menacingly at his opponent, a dark smile spreading across his face. Adrian is very surprised and mentally wonders if this hamster just smiled at him. Selina, meanwhile, returns him to the cage so that he can continue his business. Pin is a sacred being, worshipped by many and considered by some to be part of the divine plan. In this place, where hundreds of animals come every day, there are only two rulers for him to obey. The first ruler, of course, is Ping himself, whose main territory is the pharmacy on the second floor. The second ruler is rightfully considered to be Sunja, who is Ojin Kim's right hand, and the supreme ruler of the clinic. He clarifies that it is considered as such only at first glance, and without further delving. He certainly acknowledges her power, since he is too small, but he still cannot be touched without consequences. All this is because of the core that is located in his forehead, and allows him to feel unpunished. The moment someone crosses his path, he can act exponentially and cause a catastrophe. Pin recalls that when they first met, Sunja instinctively sensed danger, and launched a daring attack. However, he immediately demonstrated his strength and made everyone tremble in fear of his incredible power. After this, he was taken in by the true mistress of this place, named Selina, and he began to live as one of the two rulers. Sometime later, a fawn that had been hit by a cart burst into the clinic, adding that it was no longer breathing. Nearby customers wonder if it's too late and lament that she came with a dead pet. Ojin quickly examines the fawn and finds that the airways are clear, after which he asks Pio to time the minutes. Immediately after this, he begins to perform indirect cardiac massage in order to at least somehow restart it. The procedure looks very strange, since he has to give the deer artificial respiration. People nearby wonder what he is doing, emphasizing that they are seeing such a procedure for the first time. However, it bears fruit, and after a while the fawn begins to breathe again, and its heart starts up again. Ojin quickly takes his pulse and reports that, fortunately, they were able to bring him back to life. However, the treatment procedure does not end there, and he notes that he needs to be transferred to the examination room immediately. Pin watches this closely, and reflects that bringing the dead back to life is truly an impressive feat. He realizes that Ojin Kim is not such a simple person, and now understands why Selina took him under her command. He also remembers Mandy Kim, whom he dislikes because she is the offspring of Ojin Kim. From his point of view, these are just medicinal plants that are grown here, but she thinks too much of herself. The pathetic attempts to show off look pretty funny, but Pin constantly reacts to them. Thus, a feud arises between them, and Pin continues to glare at Mandy. He enjoys his impunity for a long time and wonders what the plants can do to him, because they are weak. Night falls and Pin continues his grueling training, constantly running on the wheel. After a while, he gets tired and realizes that today's training is over, and he can rest peacefully. He jumps out of the cage and decides to take a special tactical position that he has already developed for himself. He jumps on top of the closet to enjoy the view from there. It is also where his headquarters are located, specially presented to him as a sign of incredible loyalty and fidelity. From this place you can see the entire clinic, and it is the best place to maintain a comfortable temperature and humidity. And suddenly, to prevent anything irreparable from happening, Pin froze in surprise and indignation. It turns out that his precious headquarters was destroyed by an unknown creature that managed to get there. Pin falls to his knees for a moment and ponders what kind of creature could stoop to such a level. He hears a strange rustling sound and realizes that Mandy is nearby, learning to get out of the potty. Looking at her, He notices an incredibly satisfied expression on her face and feels a complete sense of impunity. Pinpin wonders how this creature dared to do such a thing, unaware of the consequences. Pinpin recalls that recently, due to the development of new drugs, Mandy ate all sorts of junk and learned to move around without a potty. He says that the ability to somehow move his pathetic legs does not give him the right to challenge him. After this, he throws himself into the air to restore order in this place and punish the violators. He delivers a quick and powerful blow to the mandrake's body, but she manages to block it in time. Pinpin is thrown backwards at high speed, but manages to stabilize himself in flight and stop. He realizes that his opponent has become much stronger and more powerful due to the effects of drugs. He also realizes that Mandy's durability has also increased, and now he will have to take that into account. However, from his point of view, pure fighting power cannot be imitated with meager drugs. He quickly jumps up in the hopes of taking revenge in a mirror image on this pathetic plant. He realizes that without a pot to return to, Mandy will simply dry up and die forever. Under Pinpin's powerful blows, the pot falls down and breaks, scattering earth all over the floor. Mandy falls to her knees in despair and begins to cry, trying to understand how Pinpin dared to break her pot. Pinpin continues to look at her proudly, adding that this is precisely the difference in level between them. Mandy turns towards him in irritation, and Pinpin realizes that he has started celebrating his victory prematurely. Mandy begins to quickly take a deep breath to prepare for the sonic attack. Pinpin tries to cover his ears, but his arms are too short to reach them. Luckily, instead of a powerful scream, Mandy only lets out a hoarse whisper, which sounds rather unimpressive. Pinpin happily realizes that since she started coming out of the pot, she has lost her voice and can no longer scare others. He begins to laugh menacingly and notes that she fully deserved her fate with her arrogance. Ojin comes downstairs after hearing the sounds of breaking pots and wonders what happened. The first thing he comes across is a distraught Mandy, who looks like everything she held dear has been taken from her. Ojin picks her up and says that he understands perfectly the grief of losing her home. He tries to calm her down when suddenly a brilliant solution comes to him about what he needs to do. He realizes that it is time to transplant her, as she has received a generous dose of growth serum and has grown 1.5 times. The next morning, Ojin notes that this is why they prepared a new, spacious house for her. He reports that inside there are several layers of the best soil they could find. He also adds that as a bonus they brought a portion of elite organic fertilizers. Ojin plants the mandrake in the ground and congratulates her on her housewarming, hoping that she will like it very much. To his great surprise, she reacts with absolutely no enthusiasm, as if she is ill. Ojin asks her if she likes everything and how she feels in her new home, but she doesn't answer. Selena watches closely to see what is happening and whether there is any way to fix it. Suddenly she picks up a mandrake leaf and plucks it out to test her sensory sensitivity. Mandy turns around indignantly, and Ojin braces himself for the sonic attack that is about to follow. However, despite all her intentions and incredible rage, Mandy only repeats her hoarse whisper instead of screaming. Selena concludes that because Mandy was using the potty so often, she lost her voice and now needs rehabilitation. Ojin asks her not to worry, adding that after the transplant, her voice will return very quickly. However, the next day, Mandy begins to look so bad that it causes serious concern. Ojin wonders why she suddenly aged so much, as it could lead to death. Selena suggests that she is lacking fertilizer and needs to add a few more nutrients. Pio immediately stops them both and says that such treatment of the plant is simply monstrous. She asks how they could do such a stupid thing, and accuses them of changing all the soil in the pot. She also asks if they have ever done any farming, to which they have no answer. Pio states that for a plant, the earth is like blood and flesh, which constantly nourishes it with the necessary substances. She adds that if you suddenly change your familiar land to a completely new one, you will have to wait for the connection to form. She also says that if they had kept Mandy in the new land any longer, she would have withered away with no way to save her. Pio sternly points out that now they will have to hope that Mandy is a strong enough plant. She states that to prevent moisture loss, all leaves should be removed first. Mandy is feeling worse and worse with each passing hour, but this time the deterioration concerns her mental state. After this, it is placed in a well-ventilated area, but the sunlight is blocked to prevent photosynthesis. Ojin covers all the windows with curtains and says that this is done solely for Mandy's sake, to make her feel better. Night falls, but Mandy cannot sleep, as the emotional anxiety over what happened continues to weigh on her. She cries quietly, hoping that the troubles will go away on their own, and she will recover quickly. However, her old enemy suddenly approaches her, and she realizes that this night will be longer than she would like. Ping Ping came to mock her, because this is just the beginning of his grand plan. He takes out a small leaf that was previously on Mandy's head, and hints that he is going to eat it. Mandy immediately begins to get indignant, but she can't do anything against him because she is too weakened. Pin begins to eat the leaf with a satisfied look, realizing that he has the whole night to mock his enemy. Ojin instantly grabs him by the scruff of the neck and lifts him into the air, announcing that he has finally caught the bastard. Looking at it, he notes that it has now become clear who is constantly stealing herbs, adding that it is not good for the rodent. He plucks a mandrake leaf from Ping's mouth and asks him if he knows how valuable these leaves are. He also accuses him of being too naughty lately, but Ping immediately responds with a cheeky bite. Sunja rushes into the attack to put this impudent hamster, who has already lost all fear, in his place. At the same second, she delivers a powerful blow to the hamster and sends him flying out of control. Ping feels intense pain from the blow, but also realizes that his star has not yet activated. Ojin, with tears in his eyes, notes that this is the most undesirable outcome of all possible. He begs all the higher beings of the world to cancel the process of division that is already in motion. The process fires a powerful beam towards Pin, not giving him a second to react. The beam envelops its body and prevents the division process, gradually absorbing the energy contained in the star. After a few moments, the beams seem to separate the star from Ping's body and fly into the air. Ojin looks at what is happening in surprise, trying to figure out what to do and how to control the situation. The light begins to wander throughout the room, ricocheting off different surfaces, making the situation extremely unpredictable. At a certain point, the beam is directed straight towards Mandy, who accidentally ends up in its path. Mandy realizes that this is likely where her story ends, as she won't be able to dodge it. Ojin rushes towards her in fear, hoping to prevent serious injury. Fortunately, this intervention not only did no harm, but also restored Mandy. Mandy feels an incredible glow emanating from her aura and realizes that her powers have fully returned. Pin and Ojin watch this in surprise and try to understand what caused it. The next morning, Selena calmly explains that this is normal plant cell division. She adds that the fission core's energy came into contact with Mandy, causing abnormal cell division, and that's all. Pio is the happiest of all because Mandy was her favorite plant, and Mandy continues to dance and rejoice. Selena suddenly turns her gaze towards the enclosure where Pin is sitting, and notices that he is in a depressed state. She looks at him carefully and asks what happened. She also tries to reassure him by saying that the fission nucleus is normal, and has simply lost some of its energy. She hands him a mandrake leaf and tells him that as soon as his strength is restored, the plant will also return to normal. Selena carefully watches the processes happening to Ping and remembers her master. She mentally thanks him for the work he has done, and notes that the fission core he has created is simply magnificent. There is a terrifying story in the western forest that can make even the most seasoned hunter's blood run cold. This story tells of a beauty who looks like an ordinary woman with long hair. In fact, she turns out to be a terrible cannibal with long fangs, who cruelly deals with her victims. According to legend, this creature has no hind legs and moves by crawling on its front paws, and it appears when a baby cries. There is a theory that it is a vengeful spirit that went mad after losing its cub, but no one knows the whole truth. O-jin interrupts the story, explaining that it is not worth saying something so plausible. Pio claims that the story just told is true, and O-jin asks if she saw the creature. Pio proudly adds that no one has ever seen anything like it, but Selena claims that she has encountered this creature. O-jin turns to her, startled, and asks what she means. Selena explains that she saw tracks, as if someone was crawling on its front paws, and notes that the number of people has decreased. A terrible, sticky fear creeps through O-jin's body, and he understands that he urgently needs to find some kind of peace. He hears a strange sound outside the door and wonders who decided to make it at such a time. Selena says that someone must have decided to visit them and heads for the door, despite her friend's entreaties. As soon as the door opens, Max comes in, holding a piece of clothing in his hands. Ojin greets him happily, then tries to get the piece to see what it is. Upon further inspection, it becomes clear that the clothes belong to Mr. Sven. Ojin and Max quickly run towards the forest where Sven lives and try to shout to him. Sven appears alive and well and asks why they came here at such a time. Ojin explains that Max brought the piece of fabric because it belongs to him, but he doesn't immediately recognize it. After turning the piece over in his hands for a bit, he realizes that it is a piece of Max's favorite toy. He adds that he has been very busy lately, and Max was apparently bored, so he decided to play with someone else. Ojin asks why Sven is working at such an hour, adding that it will soon be night. Sven points to the nets near the trees and asks if Ojin can see them. He adds that there is a kitten inside, and Ojin hears a pitiful cry, trying to understand how this is possible. Sven claims that poachers have been setting up these traps recently. He also notes that poachers often come across cubs, and Ojin understands that even such freaks exist in this world. After a while, Sven says that the baby is caught too high and he can't reach him. After thinking for a bit, he says that he needs to bring a pole to at least somehow reach the kitten. Ojin doesn't answer, when suddenly he notices something very strange near the tree. He looks at the eerie marks and wonders what these traces are, realizing that they were left by some creature. Sven looks closely at these marks and says that they look like scratches. Ojin turns around and notes that there are quite a few strange tracks here. He notices with horror that they look as if an animal had crawled there using only its front paws. Ojin hears someone start whining and asks Sven why this is happening at such a crucial moment. Sven turns to him in horror and says that there was a sound, which means there is someone else here. Gradually the crying becomes louder and an unknown creature appears from behind it. Ojin and Sven realize that they now need to run away urgently, as that very spirit from the horror stories has come for them. However, upon closer inspection it becomes clear that this is some kind of animal that was badly injured. Ojin realizes that all this time it was a fox in front of them, and not the monster they imagined. He discovers that the fox has injured its hind legs, which is why its tracks look like someone is crawling on its front paws. Meanwhile, the kitten's complaints continue to be heard from the trap, spreading over tens of meters. Hearing it, the fox begins to howl loudly, and the sound resembles the cry of a young girl or a baby. Ojin and Sven step aside, after which the fox continues to scratch the tree trunk with all his might. Ojin realizes that the fox is reacting to the kitten's meowing, and probably wants to eat it to restore its strength. Meanwhile, the fox continues to make every effort to shake the trap. Ojin realizes that if this continues, the trap will fall and everyone inside will die. After some time, the fox reaches its target, and the trap with the net falls down. Ojin rushes forward to intercept the trap and prevent tragedy. Opening the net, he finds inside a kitten that has gotten a lot of splinters lately. However, to his surprise, he notices that there is another fox cub inside the trap, which, unfortunately, has already died. A few moments later, a giant fox appears behind him, ready to strike. Ojin realizes that he was careless, let his guard down, and will now probably pay for it with his life. However, fortunately, a small ampule containing a special powder suddenly flies into my head. Suspecting its purpose, he realizes that it is a tranquilizer for animals. The fox falls to the ground and loses consciousness, and now you can breathe a sigh of relief, as the danger has been neutralized. Selena arrived on time and asked if anyone was hurt during the fox attack. Ojin sincerely thanks her and asks when she arrived, to which the girl replies that she just arrived. After carefully examining the fox, she notes that it is an ordinary sky blue fox. Ojin takes out his field bag and tries to examine it, realizing that the fox is in a very poor condition. The fox's hind legs show signs of recent birth, which explains why she moved by crawling. Selena notes that the cub appears to have appeared quite recently. She adds that the condition of her breasts shows that the cubs have not nursed for quite some time. Ojin understands what happened here, and the thought gradually settles in his mind, causing horror. He realizes that the fox cubs he found trapped are most likely her cubs, which she was trying to save. A few nights ago, poachers were walking through the forest to hunt foxes using firearms. They came across several cubs and quickly shot them, hoping to make a lot of money. They knew it was a small specimen, but they could still get a fair amount of money for it because it was white. Their wish does not come true, since such behavior only attracts the attention of their angry mother. The white fox became angry when she saw her cubs were dying and was ready to tear them to pieces. She immediately pounces on hunters who are poorly oriented in the night forest. She pursues them for a long time in order to inflict as many wounds as possible, but they still manage to escape. After this, she returns to her cubs to check if any of them are still alive. After some time, it turns out that there was only one fox cub left, who managed to hide, so he was taken for dead. Taking her remaining cub in her teeth, she carefully carries it to safety, hoping that it will regain its strength. However, after a while the weather quickly deteriorates and torrential rain begins to fall from the sky. Exhausted, the fox collapses on the grass, realizing that she does not have the strength to reach a dry place. However, the presence of the cub brings her at least some joy on this gloomy day. She tries to stay alert, but fatigue takes its toll, and after a while she falls completely asleep. After some time, a young kitten emerges from the bushes, meowing in fear. He quickly meets a small fox, who at this moment is awake and full of energy. They begin to play happily with each other, as the cubs love to play without stopping. However, in their careless games they fail to notice another trap. Thus, they find themselves in a net that quickly closes over them and lifts them high up. The fox immediately wakes up and begins to look around, hearing a suspicious noise. Meanwhile, the two cubs continue to be with each other and try to escape, but they fail. The fox begins to try to find her only cub by smell. After some time, she hears a meow and heads towards the sound to figure out what it is. Along with this meowing, she also hears the plaintive squeaks of her cub. The white fox wakes up from a nightmare and tries to look around, hoping to find her cubs. She begins to wave her paws and scream loudly, giving in to an instinctive blind rage and grief. Ojin grabs her body and tries to calm her down, explaining that she doesn't need to worry so much. The fox turns out to be very nimble and almost immediately bites him on the hand, leaving serious wounds. Ojin injects her with a sedative, explaining that if she moves, the wounds could get worse, so she needs to calm down. After a while, her eyes close again and she lies down on Ojin's lap, after which he recommends that she sleep some more. The next day, clients who come to the clinic hear strange sounds, but cannot understand what they are. Sunja is clearly unhappy with the sudden guest who has occupied the entire room where she usually lives. Pio apologizes to the protagonist's personal pet, explaining that it is not allowed to go there now. Ojin monitors the animal's condition and notes that 3 days have passed since its stay in the hospital, but it is still acting up. He is thinking hard about the fact that the animal is developing a resistance to the sedative, and this is clearly not good. Pio suggests that the fox doesn't realize her cubs are dead, so she continues looking for them as soon as she opens her eyes. Ojin states that this is not true, as the cubs had already been dead for 3 to 4 days by the time they found them. He adds that if the fox had been nearby the whole time, she would have probably noticed that at some point their crying stopped. Looking at the condition of the paw, he notes that the fox seems to refuse to recover. He reflects on how animals have their own traumas, hidden memories, and anger. Ojin notes that they are constantly attacking themselves and the world, reminiscent of the monster from the horror stories of the Western Forest. He asks if the kitten they rescued is okay, to which Pio replies that it is much better. She also notes that the kitten is still small, so it needs to be closely monitored. Ojin asks her to make sure the kitten is warm and under no circumstances goes near the fox's cage. Pio notices that the heating pad the kitten was sleeping on has cooled down and needs to be replaced as soon as possible. She forgets to close the cage and asks to wait a little, adding that she will soon bring a new heating pad. The kitten, having barely opened its eyes, looks around in search of its lost mother. The first thing he notices is a cage containing a white fox. After a while, Pio returns with a hot water bottle in his hands and apologizes to the kitten for the long wait. However, she quickly discovers that the kitten is not in the cage, and this causes her to become a little stupefied. She notices that the door is open and tries to figure out where the kitten has gone, looking around. A few moments later, she discovers that the kitten is small enough to slip into the cage. Pio quickly calls his boss and reports that something bad has happened because the kitten has gone into the fox's cage. Ojin understands that he needs to act quickly, because if the fox wakes up right now, something terrible will happen. He realizes that in this state the fox will definitely bite the kitten to death, and this will be another life that he could not save. Meanwhile, the kitten attaches itself to its mother to get some milk. Because of this, the fox gradually comes to her senses and slowly opens her eyes, looking around. Ojin runs inside and sees the fox looking back at him menacingly, before turning her gaze to the kitten. He understands that he did not manage to arrive in time, and hopes that the worst outcome can still be avoided. However, to the surprise of everyone present, the fox suddenly begins to cry, looking at the kitten. She carefully lowers the kitten and begins to lick it slowly, assuming that it is one of her cubs. Ojin freezes in place and decides not to make any sudden movements, so as not to provoke the fox into aggression. Meanwhile, the fox feels much better and gradually begins to recover from its wounds. After some time, the kitten completely comes to his senses and begins to be mischievous, like any other cat. Pio runs after him to return to her the medical glove that he managed to steal from the lab. However, the kitten manages to quickly run to its mother, who is still undergoing treatment, and completes the recovery procedure. Pio realizes that climbing into the cage to get the baby would be suicide, so she decides to come back later. After some time, as a result of another examination, Ojin comes to the conclusion that the wounds are beginning to heal and the nightmares have stopped. Pio happily notes that she thought the fox would never have full use of her hind legs again. Ojin states that this is simply incredible and can only be called a miracle. He reflects on the fact that he will never be able to fully return what bad people took away. However, it is a great happiness for him that he can at least partially atone for the guilt of his family. After some time, they are released into the wild, so that they can live in the wild as they should. Ojin waves goodbye, and expresses his hope that they will never meet again on such a sad occasion. The fox, roughly understanding what he was talking about, nods his head as a sign of farewell, and soon disappears from sight. After this, the rumors about the monster from the Western Forest die down, and new ones begin to circulate, about a white fox that carries a kitten with her. Meanwhile, at Ojin Kim's clinic, clients are surprised when a radish-like plant suddenly starts moving. A client who has been here many times before smilingly informs that it is a mandrake named Mandy who lives here. He adds that, according to rumors, it is something like a guardian spirit for this hospital, which everyone treats with respect. However, another client says it appears to be outdated information as the hospital has a different custodian. A little girl who has also been here before reports that, according to rumors, there is a very scary cat here. She adds that no matter what predator comes, it dares not peep in front of this cat, and in fact, it is a messenger of the devil. Mandy starts to get angry because some pathetic cat is getting all the attention instead of her gorgeous self. Immediately after this, she heads towards Sunji's bowl to take immediate revenge. Coming closer, she throws water into the bowl with incredible determination to show how cool she is. Watching her, clients wonder if she is really the real owner of this clinic and is not afraid of anything. Mandy's triumphant triumph is short-lived as the bowl's owner appears behind her. Sunja looks at the troublemaker with an angry look, who for some reason decided that she was the boss here. Mandy takes a deep breath to defend herself with the powerful scream she has now regained. Sunja realizes that she is not in danger and begins to meow, preparing to attack. However, suddenly she begins to cough and loses her fighting and threatening appearance. People look at her with fear and assume that she is ill. After some time, a lump of an unknown substance flies out of the cat's mouth, which looks quite disgusting. The lump flies straight into Mandy's face, and because it was flying at such a high speed, she falls on her back. After this, Sunja calmly begins to lick herself, not paying attention to what happened. Ojin explains that it's just a hairball, adding that cats usually lick themselves with their tongue to stay clean. He adds that the hair that enters the body accumulates into a ball and comes out either from one side or the other. He also notes that he has been busy lately and hasn't brushed Sunja's hair, so she needs a good brushing. However, an hour later, the procedure is still not finished, and he is trying to understand what the reason is. He comes to the conclusion that this is no longer just shedding, but real baldness, which requires urgent action. After some time, he discovers a huge bald spot on Sunji's body. Ojin carefully leans over the bald spot and tries to figure out what it is, as it is clearly a disease. After examining the skin, which is no longer hairless, he realizes that it is a fungal dermatitis that causes hair loss. Ojin mentally scolds himself for not noticing that his cat had developed a skin condition. After this, he opens the box to find there a special tool that he had been keeping all this time. He is glad that it was not in vain that he prepared the instrument, made to order by the best master. Looking happily at Sunja, he realizes that he will soon be able to begin her hand training, the first in the world. Ojin watches the instrument perform in action and notes that it performs beyond all praise. However, it would be a big mistake to say that Sunja enjoys the procedure and that it does not cause her any discomfort. She suddenly jumps into the air, trying to escape the cruel pressure from her master. She also begins to hiss at him, indicating that she does not want her fur to continue being cut. Ojin is very impressed when his beloved cat suddenly hisses at him out of aggression. There is a slight pause, and he realizes that a normal owner would back down in such a situation so as not to destroy trust. However, he firmly decides that now he will act as a veterinarian, not as an owner, to help the animal. Ojin awakens his inner veterinarian spirit, who never backs down when confronting an animal. He holds the cat tightly and begins to cut its fur to see how deep the fungus has penetrated. He tries to calm her down, telling her that it will all be over soon and she doesn't need to worry. Sunja starts screaming loudly, and Ojin apologizes to her, telling her that it will be over soon. He understands that in such matters one must act quickly, since an animal's patience is a very fragile resource. Sunja starts screaming desperately, and suddenly activates the collar, which creates a powerful flash of light. Ojin looks at his pet in surprise, as it gradually begins to glow more and more. A few moments later, a beam of light pierces the office he is in, and goes far into the sky. Ojin hugs Sunja tightly, frightened and trying to understand what just happened. After some time, he decides to look at the table and discovers that a special portal has appeared there. After some time, a hologram of the now well-known Kalian emerges from the portal. The elf states that he is approaching Ojin with his family's blessing. He emphasizes that, according to the agreement, he answers the call to see how he can help. After some time, he completely materializes and appears right on the table in the office. Ojin decides that they need to brew a few cups of tea to discuss everything properly. The first thing he does is apologize for calling them for nothing, adding that he is a very busy man. Kalian tells Ojin not to worry about it, as he knows how to solve the problem. He explains that Monokeros's hair loss is not due to a skin disease, but rather a precursor to the condition. He explains that Monokeros goes through several growth periods, and each time his fur falls out. Kalian emphasizes that this is just a precursor to the clinic, and it should not worry Ojin. He also says that during this period the creature must cleanse its body in a special pond. He warns that if this is not done, the lost hair may not grow back and the creature will remain disabled. Ojin takes a moment to reflect on the fact that he owns a creature he raised with love. He can't believe that his pet has suddenly started going bald and there's nothing he can do about it. Kalian reports that it is not dangerous to health and that it will take a long time for the fur to grow back. Ojin asks where this pond is so that he can go there immediately. Kalian explains that the pond is not a geographical name, but a general term for lakes with high mana content. He adds that a characteristic feature of such lakes is a bright red flower. Looking at the map, he notes that there is one such lake in the area, which is declared a nature reserve. He emphasizes that it is very dangerous for a person to go there, as there are many traps there. Ojin is irritated by this information and declares that they will head there tomorrow. When asked who will look after the pets in his absence, Ojin states that he has a doctor who will take his place. After some time, they find themselves in the western forest, which at this moment looks simply incredible. The heroes find themselves in a mysterious place surrounded by legends and creepy stories. Strange things often happen here, so people rarely come here, but the heroes stumble upon those very flowers. Kalian explains that if these flowers are here, then the lake is very close. Ojin approaches the flower and notices that it looks very strange, but Selena immediately stops him. She warns him of the danger, explaining that these flowers release a powerful poisonous charge when struck. She adds that besides these flowers, there are many dangerous creatures here, so you need to be careful. Suddenly, they discover Sunja, who has brought them a snake that she has been hunting for quite some time. Selena uses magic to take control of the snake, explaining that it can pretend. Ojin praises Sunja for deciding to bring a gift and notes that he really appreciates her generosity. Selena examines the snake carefully and reports that it is a very dangerous species. After this, she turns the snake's face towards Ojin and says that it is a snake with a human face. Ojin understands that this is very dangerous and decides to strictly restrain the pet for this dangerous act. After some time, they finally arrive at the lake, and it turns out to be even more beautiful than in the books. Ojin looks around the lake carefully and notes that it is a very beautiful place. He asks them both to stay here, adding that he will go to the lake alone to help the pets. Kalian says that this is a very dangerous decision, and advises to think again about how to implement all this. Ojin explains that when cats are in a vulnerable position while bathing, their alertness increases. From his point of view, if there was anyone other than the owner nearby at that moment, the cat would experience severe stress. He remembers that during haircuts she behaves very naughty, and during washing a real nightmare begins. Kalian notes that he understands this perfectly well, and adds that in this case, in order to scare away the spirits of the lake, he will provide protection. Kalian turns to his staff and calls upon the spirit of water to answer the call of his ancestors. After this, he decides to use the spell, directing it towards Ojin. Ojin stares at the glow, mesmerized, trying to figure out what the spell will do to him in the end. Kalian proudly announces that no one will be able to touch Ojin Kim in this incredibly powerful outfit. Ojin realizes that he wants to sink into the ground from excitement, but hopelessness takes over him, and he calls Sunju with him. He immediately summons some special bars that Sunja loves, explaining that it's all for her. Ojin decides to take advantage of the moment and carefully lowers Sunja down, hoping that she won't be afraid. Sunji's reaction is almost instantaneous. She looks around in surprise, as if she felt a sharp cold. A few moments later, she jumps to the side, freeing herself from Ojin's embrace. After spending a few moments in the air, she falls down and dives into the water with incredible courage and lightness. Ojin initially rushes after her, realizing that all cats really don't like water. However, it quickly becomes clear that Sunja is an exception to the rule and feels at ease in the water. Ojin reflects that this is incredibly rare, as such a cat can only be found if 3 generations of ancestors have done good. He watches her swim with ease for a long time, and still can't believe his eyes. He notes that she is incredibly cute, and would like to show it to everyone in the world, but there are no cameras in this world. After this, he discovers some shiny particles in the water, and assumes that these are particles of magical energy. Suddenly he remembers the hot springs he trained in and rejoices at those times. Tears begin to flow from his eyes, and he reflects that he is almost completely overwhelmed by a feeling of nostalgia. He also remembers his favorite dish, shashlik, which he really misses. A huge number of dishes that remained in the previous world are now unavailable to him, but this is not a reason to be sad. Looking around, he reflects that in the real world, such a landscape cannot be found anywhere. After this, he approaches Sunji and says that it is time to wash up, as they have been playing for too long. Looking at the comb, he discovers a huge amount of hair on it. He wonders if this is normal and points out that it looks like her old skin is coming off. After a while, the soap falls into the water because it is too slippery. Ojin tries to get the soap, but accidentally grabs one of the dangerous plants. He remembers Selena's words about how these plants release poison when touched, and sense danger. The flower reacts almost instantly, turning towards him and preparing to release a cloud of poison. Ojin looks at the flower in fascination, and does not have time to move away to avoid being poisoned. As soon as the poison enters the respiratory tract, he begins to cough loudly, hoping that everything will go away on its own. However, after a while, everything suddenly stops, and he feels that his clothes have changed to the old ones. He looks around cautiously, trying to understand where he is and why stone walls have suddenly appeared around him. He begins to get nervous because he does not feel the presence of Sunja, whom he just tried to bathe in the lake. Suddenly, something large and very heavy places a clawed paw on his shoulder, forcing him to turn around. Ojin turns around carefully and sees in front of him a very strange creature, resembling a lion with a giant horn. He looks into the eyes of this incredible creature and wonders who it is and what it is doing here.